joining us this evening, please note that we are being recorded. So we are also holding our meetings remotely in the interest of public health, safety, and welfare. If you do not wish to be recorded, hang on one second, I got myself off. Have a recording thing. Just one second. My apologies, everybody. I guess we have eliminated the recording warning, but anyway, we're being recorded. If you don't want your comments recorded, you're going to have to submit them to the board office. Colleagues, being elected as a member of this body imposes an ethical obligation for each of us to enhance and maintain the public confidence in this agency. As a board of directors, it's our collective duty to our constituents, stakeholders, and staff to conduct our business in an atmosphere of mutual respect, cooperation, civility, trust, and collegiality. Their values we all agree upon. As such, I'd encourage each of us to review the operating guidelines adopted by this board to act in accordance with those principles, which are available on the board of directors page on the RTD website. Thank you. Ms. McManus, will you call the roll?
Yes, thank you. Director Bouquet.
Present.
Director Broom.
Present.
Director Catlin.
Here.
Director Cook.
Here.
Director Davidson.
Here.
Director Deschel.
Here.
Director Geisinger.
Here.
Director Lewis.
Present.
Director Rivera Malpietti.
Here.
Director Rosenthal.
Present.
Director Sloan.
Here.
Director Whitmore.
Present.
Director Williams.
Good evening. I am here.
And Chair Busick.
And I'm here too. My apologies, I got ahead of myself with regard to the public participation and recording that's coming up. And Director Lewis.
Chairman?
Yes, sir.
Point of order. I don't believe I heard my name called, but I'd like the record to reflect that I am in fact here.
I'm sorry. I thought I did call you. My apologies if I didn't.
Thanks, Director Tisdale. We see you, your bright, shiny face right there. And thanks for letting us know. Okay. Public comment, public participation period is next. It is open to anyone who would like to address the board. If you wish to speak and have not already done so, please raise your virtual hand or press *9 on your phone. Staff will unmute you when it is your turn to speak. If you are dialed in, press *6 to toggle your mute settings. Please bear in mind that by participating in this process, you are being recorded. If you do not wish to be recorded, then your comments will have to be submitted in writing. If any speaker has documentation or reference materials for the board, or if any member of the public would like to submit written comments, please email those materials to the board office at rtd.boardoffice@rtd-denver.com. During this time, the board will not offer comments or responses. Directors or staff may contact speakers following their comments if they raise matters that lend themselves to follow-up. Speakers should begin their remarks by stating their names, and they will have up to 3 minutes for their comments. Ms. McManus, do we have any people that have indicated a willingness to speak during the special board meeting? And you're on mute.
I see, yes, I see some hands, but there were no communications through the board office emails.
Okay. And
So the first up is Amanda Mansfield.
Ms. Mansfield, you are recognized if you just state your name and you have 3 minutes to give us your comments.
Hi, thank you very much. Can you all hear me okay?
Yes.
Wonderful. Hello all, my name is Amanda Mansfield. I'm Senior Manager of Transportation at Boulder Transportation Connections and the Boulder Chamber. Thank you for having me here tonight, and I'd like to reiterate the comments that the Chamber and BTC, along with other transportation partners, submitted yesterday to the board. So I'll be brief and reiterate those comments. So first, as stated in the letter we submitted, we'd like the board to consider making the FF4 bidirectional service going to and from Boulder Junction in the morning and the evening in RTD's next run board. We'd also like clarification on when the RTD Post Square station at Boulder Junction will reopen to the public. And finally, we'd like RTD to continue to fulfill the commitments it made in the 2021 RTD Accountability Committee report to focus its attention on public-private partnerships. A project that we're working on currently is the Gun Barrel Shuttle in Gun Barrel neighborhood in Boulder that fills local transit gaps. It's on-demand micro-transit shuttle, and it's the result of public-private partnerships. And so we'd love to see those kinds of projects be able to continue. And so again, we encourage RTD to continue to partner as they are on Gun Barrel to realize these kinds of wonderful projects that fill those local gaps. Those are the 3 comments we had in the letter, and that's the end of my testimony. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Ms. Mansfield. Ms. McManus, who's next?
Yes, we have James Flatham.
Mr. Flatham, if you just state your name for the record, and you'll have 3 minutes to make your comments, you may begin.
Hi there, yes, this is James Flatham. I am with the organization Greater Denver Transit. We are a new transit advocacy organization here in Denver. One of the key topics we wanted to check in on and would appreciate at the appropriate time in this meeting if the board could give us an update on the progress is regarding the possibility of allowing e-bikes on transit. Given the huge success that the city of Denver and the state has seen so far with the e-bike rebate program, we see this summer as an essential time that RTD is explicitly supportive of e-bikes, that combining mobility options, the longer distance that transit offers with the flexibility of e-bikes as new e-bike adopters this summer are kind of building habits around their new e-bikes. We view it as essential that they build these habits around RTD for RTD to fully build out ridership potential that e-bikes allow. So thank you again for the opportunity to make a comment, and we would appreciate an update on RTD's e-bike policy. Thank you.
Great, thanks for those comments. Ms. McManus, do we have another speaker?
Yes, we have Naomi Amaha.
Naomi, please state your name and you've got 3 minutes to make your comments.
You're muted.
Okay, sorry, I'm new to this. Thank you so much. My name is Naomi Amaha. I'm the Director of Policy and Government Affairs for the Denver Foundation. Good evening to everyone. Thank you for the opportunity to provide comments in support of the Reimagine RTD System Optimization Plan. My organization is a community foundation with a history of funding nonprofits that are working to improve accessibility and affordability of transportation options in Metro Denver. As an organization, we recognize all of the work that's transpired between RTD and its stakeholders to better understand transit riders' needs while also adapting to the realities facing the organization. This work has informed the service changes outlined in the SOP to meet the mobility needs of those most reliant on transit and increase overall ridership. We want to thank RTD staff, leadership, directors, those on the Reimagine RTD committee, and community members for their efforts. And we look forward to engaging with you all and adopting a long-term mobility plan for the future. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Maha, for those comments. Ms. McManus, do we have any more speakers?
Yes, I have 2 more speakers, starting with Molly McKinley.
Ms. McKinley, state your name and you have 3 minutes.
Great. Good evening, board members, General Manager, and CEO Johnson. Thanks for hosting this public comment period this evening. I have a couple of things to talk with you all about. First, I will touch on the system optimization plan. So I'm here, like I said, on behalf of the Denver Streets Partnership. We are here to express our support for the system optimization plan. We're a coalition of community organizations advocating for people-friendly streets in Denver. Given RTD's current funding and labor limitations, we're glad that RTD has undertaken this process, and we believe that the guiding principles are the right one. We're committed to advocating for public transit in the Denver area that's equitable, sustainable, supported by land use policies that foster density, safe, accessible, affordable, reliable, all of the good things. And you know, the COVID-19 pandemic really highlighted ridership patterns of people who rely most on transit to get where they need to go. And we're glad to see that y'all are prioritizing transit-dependent riders and the equity policies. So given RTD's limitations, we believe that this is the right decision-making philosophy and support the adoption of this plan. The SOP is about making tough choices with limited resources, and we'd be remiss not to note that the 2027 service projected in the SOP falls well short of what we really need to serve the region to meet our air quality, climate, access, and safety goals. Now more than ever, we need leaders, not just within RTD, but at the local, state, and federal levels to come to the table and get public transit back on track and identify additional resources for RTD. I've said before, it kind of hurts as an advocate to be supporting something that cuts service when at a time where we really need to be increasing service more than ever. But I just want to double down on the fact that we really support the philosophy behind this and look forward to working with all of you to advocate for ways to increase service over time. I'd also like to talk about the e-bike policy. We are also looking forward to hearing an update this evening, hopefully, and would be very supportive of getting more e-bikes on buses, just creating more opportunities for folks to be getting around the region without having to rely on a car for the sake of equity, access, air quality, climate. And then lastly, we just want to express our excitement for the Fare-Free Month of Transit in August. We want you to know that we're here to support you and get the community excited about the month of free transit. And we have lots of awesome community members within our network who are excited to create some positive buzz around that. And we hope to see y'all out and about throughout the month, hope to bump into you on transit, and just want to express support for that. There's definitely a lot of community support right now. Thanks so much for your time.
Thank you, Ms. McKinley. Ms. McManus, our next speaker.
Yes, we have Richard Bamber.
Mr. Bamber, please state your name and you'll have 3 minutes to give us your comments. Please go ahead.
Hi there, good evening. It's Richard Bamber. Tonight I'd like to talk about advertising wrap on buses and trains. So basically one of the good things about taking transit is you can sit back, look out the window, admire the scenery of our great state, let somebody else do the driving. You can't really do that if RTD has chosen to wrap the bus or train you're traveling in an all-over advertising wrap, where you can barely see out the windows. This also is an issue if you are, say, struggle to know where to stop to get off, you're visually impaired, trying to identify where you are, where the bus or the train is in its route. So what I'd like to do is call on the board to make a resolution to work with your outdoor advertising agency, Lamar, to update the instructions, and so that some of the designs that for advertising on buses and trains don't cover the windows. Some of the good examples at the moment are on commuter rail cars are Stranahan's Whiskey, American Express, and Caesars Sportsbook. So I hope the board would like to consider updating their either instructions with the Lamar contract or making a resolution, so that while I understand that advertising is a necessary evil, the riders don't feel they're basically second best and the experience isn't cheap. And thank you very much.
Thank you for your comments, Mr. Bamber. Ms. McManus, do we have any more speakers in the queue?
We have no other speakers in the queue, Chair.
Great. With no other participants in the queue, we will close the public participation and move into our recommended actions. And Ms. Johnson, I've got a question for you. My script does not show any staff presentations for the recommended actions. Will there be staff presentations?
Yes, sir, there will be staff presentations.
Okay, thanks very much for that clarification. First recommended action is the Access-a-Ride FlexRide contract extensions. And I'm looking for a motion for the Board of Directors to authorize the General Manager and CEO or her designee to enter into 3-month contract extensions with MV Transportation, Via Mobility Services, Transdev, and Transdev On Demand from October 1 through December 31, 2022 for the provision of Access-a-Ride and FlexRide services. The not to exceed amount for the contracted services is $10,728,728. Additionally, the not to exceed amount for fuel is $980,000. The total 3-month not to exceed amount for the contracted services with fuel is $11,708,728. Do I have a motion?
So moved,
Move
Director
approval.
Williams.
I've got Williams as the movant and Broom as the second. I'm going to ask for staff presentation at this time before we have discussion.
This is Michael Ford, Chief Operating Officer. I'd like to give just a little bit of a context to this extension. By way of background, the Americans with Disabilities Act, the ADA, requires public entities operating a fixed route system to also provide paratransit service to individuals with disabilities, which is comparable to the level of service provided to individuals without disabilities. RTD's paratransit services are currently provided by 4 service providers: MV Transportation, Via Mobility Services, Transdev, and Transdev On Demand. RTD also operates FlexRide service in 23 service areas within the district, providing first and last mile connections along with access to essential locations such as grocery stores, hospitals, medical facilities, employment sites, and schools. These services are currently provided by 2 service providers, MV Transportation and Via Mobility Services. Currently, approximately 65% of RTD's paratransit customer base are regularly using the agency's service, and FlexRide ridership has been steadily increasing. A request for proposal for paratransit services is currently being advertised, with proposals due on August 3rd. The contracts are scheduled to commence on January 1st, 2023. In conference with procurement and legal staff, it was determined that additional time was needed to allow potential proposers to identify sufficient garage space in this limited real estate market. The new contracts will provide continuing service at the end of the 3-month contract extension for the current paratransit service providers. Staff intends to provide the board with a recommendation at the October 2022 board meeting. By way of discussion and adopting this recommended action, RTD seeks to meet the 2021 through 2026 strategic plan priorities of community values and financial success. In May 2022, RTD requested cost proposals from current service providers to continue service through December 31st, 2022. Cost analysis and internal financial analysis indicated that the 3-month estimated cost for RTD to provide similar service internally would be $13,616,213, which is $1,907,485 higher than the 3-month cost proposed by the agency's current service providers. The financial impacts funds for the provisions of Access-a-Ride and FlexRide service effective October 1st through December 31st, 2022 are included in the 2022 budget. I'd be happy to answer any questions that the board may have at this time.
Thank you, Mr. Ford. I'll go to board comments and questions next. Great, thanks. Seeing no questions or comments, I will now take the vote. Are there any no votes on this matter? Great, seeing none, this passes unanimously 15-0. Next, we're going to go on to on-demand Uber pilot service extension. And I'm looking for a motion for the Board of Directors to authorize the general manager and CEO or her designee to enter into a 5-month contract extension with Uber for the provision of on-demand services for paratransit customers. The total 5-month not to exceed amount for the contracted services is $887,457. And do I have a motion?
So moved.
I heard Director Whitmore, and I think the second was Director Rivera-Melpier. Great, and I'll ask for this. Oh, Director Williams, I see your hand raised.
Yes, I'd like to recuse myself from this vote based on my employment. Thank you.
Thank you very much. And staff presentation is next.
Thank you. Michael Ford, Chief Operating Officer. By way of background, RTD has provided on-demand opt-in service through taxi companies branded as Access-a-Cab for Access-a-Ride customers since 2005. While an affordable alternative to RTD's paratransit customers, the taxi industry has been unable to consistently provide services within the needed response times, particularly to customers using wheelchairs. In November 2020, RTD expanded its on-demand opt-in service offerings through a more responsive platform by piloting with Uber as the first transportation network known as the TNC. The pilot area included Southeast Denver and was designed to test customer adoption, response times, and the use of wheelchairs accessible vehicles. These services have allowed a more convenient same-day alternative to traditional paratransit service, which is more affordable to customers, i.e. Uber is a $2 fare versus a $5 Access-a-Ride fare, and more cost-effective for RTD at up to $20 subsidy per trip versus a more than $75 trip costs through RTD's dedicated Access-a-Ride service. Piloting Uber as an additional provider of on-demand service has been positive for RTD customers and was expanded to the entire RTD service area in January 2022. To a parallel Access-a-Ride cab service, since the pilot expansion, RTD has seen the customer adoption increase from 12.6% of all paratransit customer trips to over 21% in June 2022. As customer demand has returned, on-demand solutions from Metro Transportation, RTD's current Access-a-Cab vendor, and the Uber pilot have recovered to 96% of pre-COVID demand compared to 66% for Access-a-Ride service. The challenges of the Access-a-Ride providers to increase their workforce to support customer demand has greatly reduced paratransit service on-time performance. The continuation of the TNC pilot program will aid in the expansion of the on-demand service as well as the release of a request for qualifications to retain additional on-demand providers, which is currently advertised with new provider agreements anticipated to be brought to the Board of Directors for consideration in October of this year. By way of discussion, RTD seeks to meet the 2021 through 2026 strategic plan priorities of community values and financial success, as staff anticipates a minimum of 2 vendors with the possibility to up to 6 to deliver paratransit services. Additionally, an internal financial analysis indicated that the 5-month estimated cost for RTD to provide similar service internally would be $3,849,075, which is $2,961,618 higher than the 5-month cost proposed by Uber. Regarding financial impacts, funds for the provisions of the on-demand Uber service effective August 1st through December 31st, 2022 are included in the 2022 budget. At this time, I'm happy to take any additional questions.
Mr. Ford, thank you for your presentation. Are there any questions or any comments with regard to this recommended action? Seeing none, I'll call for the vote. Are there any no votes on this matter? Seeing none, this passes with 14 yes votes, 0 no votes, and 1 recusal / abstention. Thank you, Mr. Ford, for that report. We'll move on to our third recommended action, and that is the August 2022 service change. I'm looking for a motion for the Board of Directors to approve the August 2022 service change package as revised and summarized in Attachment A, and to authorize the General Manager and CEO or her designee to execute contract amendments as necessary for private operators whose service is impacted by these changes. Do I have a motion?
So moved.
Director Geisinger, second. Director
Second.
Williams. Got it. Great. Staff presentation will be next. Who's going to be presenting on this?
So Michael Ford, Chief Operating Officer. I'd like to provide some background commensurate with the service change and voting process detailed in the collective bargaining agreement known as the CBA between RTD and the ATU 1001. The August 2022 service change proposal facilitates both an opportunity for RTD bus and rail operators to vote new work assignments and the opportunity for service development staff to make adjustments to the operations plan for RTD's transit network. The service change process, though contractually required, is an opportunity for RTD to update its transit service utilizing projected available resources. As of April 19th, 2020, RTD has operated a reduced level of service in response to COVID-19 impacts. As the region and the country move forward from the various mandates and emergency policies that have affected commerce and mobility, challenges to workforce availability persist. Like many service-related entities, the transit industry has seen workforce availability greatly reduced. Recognizing that RTD's reduced availability of transit operators, mechanics, amongst other positions, efforts to update RTD's service plan continues to be focused on providing RTD customers with sustainable and reliable service within the agency's available resources. The service proposals herein are a combination of scheduled adjustments and restoration of seasonal service previously suspended for summer. Efforts to increase operator availability through recruitment strategies and increased employee outreach continues, though current levels do not support a substantial increase to service at this time. Additionally, the newly adopted CBA is anticipated to have positive impacts on both employee retention and recruitment. By way of discussion in alignment with the strategic plan priorities of customer excellence and recognizing the agency's people power problem, the proposals herein are directed at improving on-time performance, maintaining CBA compliance, and adjusting service levels to match summer ridership demand. The board adopted guidance for proposed service change continues to be service performance evaluations based on RTD service standards, the effects of the overall integrity of the transit network and on transit-dependent markets, the availability of alternative services to affected riderships, cost-effective distribution throughout the district and family of services, and the ability to enhance service when possible. Title VI of the Civil Rights Act, benefits and services are provided without regard to race, color, or national origin, also disparate effects on low-income and minority populations, and response to changes in the communities where services are provided. A summary of public hearings. There were 3 virtual public hearings conducted on June 2nd, 2020 at noon, and on June 22nd at noon and 5 p.m. These hearings have been recorded and are available for review. Comments for this public comment period have been summarized and are listed in attachment B in your report. Additionally, changes to initial recommendations. Staff receives input during the public comment process and continues to conduct additional analysis after the initial service recommendations are communicated to the board of directors. Depending on the outcome of the public comment process and continued analysis, staff may or may not propose modifications to these initial recommendations. The following proposals have been added or significantly modified. Route 49, Commerce City, scheduling adjustments to improve on-time performance. Route 66, Arapahoe Road, schedule adjustments to improve bus connections. And Route 88L, Thornton, Commerce City, Central Park, schedule adjustments to improve on-time performance. There's a summary list of service proposals that are provided in attachment A. And at this time, I would also call on Jesse Carter, our Senior Manager of Service Planning, to join me at this particular time, and we'd be happy to answer any of your questions. Thank you.
Great, thank you for your report. Questions and comments from directors are next. Director Deschel, you're first in the queue. Go right ahead.
Thank you so much for the presentation. I saw online, I believe these are scheduled to take change on August 22nd or 21st. Is that still accurate?
I'm sorry, if I might.
Please go ahead.
Okay, can everyone hear me? I'm having some issues with my, okay, thank you. The actual run board itself is supposed to start on Sunday, August 21st.
Okay.
Okay.
I guess my follow-up question is whether there's any flexibility on that start date. We have a school tripper service, and as I think many of us here know, the students who take public transportation are often our most vulnerable students. And
Sure.
for those students, the ability to get to school is not just an education, but it's also for some of them psychological services, development services, other social services. The school tripper service appears to impact Denver Public Schools, Sheridan Public Schools, as well as Boulder Valley School District. And it is awesome that for Denver Public Schools, we are starting on the 21st, which means for kids' first day of class on the 22nd, they are able to take RTD. However, the middle school, high school walk-in registration is August 11th and 12th in DPS. And again, those are those students who are often even more marginalized. For Sheridan, which is a less affluent school district, they start school even earlier. And I believe Boulder Valley School District starts on August 17th, with teachers typically reporting before then. Do we have any flexibility to push that up so that it seems like a missed opportunity to start a school tripper service after school already started?
Right. One thing I would say, and I'm sorry, this is Jesse Carter, Senior Manager of Service Development. Normally what we would do if we find that the school year is actually starting before our run board dates, because that's one of the reasons why we have the run board set for September/August, is because of the school trippers and the ramp up of services. We will run what are called special service orders, in which we would put those out prior to the start of the run board to accommodate those school trippers. However, I will have to look into whether or not Sheridan is one of those that we quite normally do. You will also note that in the CBA, we actually don't have an August service change. We actually have a September service change. We go early in August to accommodate the school start times. However, as you've mentioned, there are some schools that are deciding to offer some things a bit earlier. So we can take a look at offering some additional trippers prior to the startup of the run board via special service order.
And how many of our special service orders are fulfilled usually in a given year?
We are in very unprecedented times. So, normally I would say, prior to COVID, I would have said, by the most part, all of our special service orders are fulfilled. But given that we are short on staff, I can't actually say that. So you're probably going to hear from me as a broken record in this presentation and others that we do have a resource challenge when it comes down to bus operators and mechanics at this point.
Okay, I may be coming back with an amendment to amend our start date there, but make sure our kids can get to school and start the year off right. because we got the similar report last year, and I think it's really critical that our students are able to eat and that they're able to get to school and start the year off strong.
Understood. I would like a chance to talk to you with you offline about this subject if possible.
Okay.
Okay.
Not a
Thank you,
problem.
Director.
Director Geisinger, you're next.
I'm happy to go next, but when I see Ms. Johnson raise her hand, I also am happy to see if she wants to address
Yeah.
the last issue.
You bet. I just saw that. GMCEO Johnson, would you like to make some comments?
Thank you very kindly, Mr. Chair, and thank you, Director Geisinger and Director Deschel for your questions and your concerns relative to service delivery, and Mr. Carter for his response. Recognizing that you indicated that you may put forward an amendment, I do want to qualify, though we do have a collective bargaining agreement, in that we would have to work in tandem because we collectively agreed to set agreement. And so recognizing that the team and I will do everything possible to accommodate relative to the comments you brought forward, I just wanted to manage the board's expectations as we go forward. This isn't unilateral, so we have to work in tandem. So I did not want the opportunity to pass and I not speak to that. So thank you very much.
Thanks for those clarifications. First Vice Chair Geisinger, go ahead.
Thank you very much. I think mine might fall into the category of a mistake or typo. I checked with service planning staff. The skip on Broadway and Boulder, the proposal states, this proposal reinstates the fall winter weekday service frequency 15 minutes that was suspended with the May 2022 service change for fall winter. No cost impact is anticipated. To be consistent with the SOP and what we've always done when school comes back is the skip goes back to 10 minutes. And I think that, it was suspended with the May 2022 service change for summer. I don't want to make a big deal out of it. I just wanted to make sure the record was here. Do I need to make an amendment or is that just fixable?
Actually,
Carter?
I think, and I'm sorry, this is Jesse Carter, Senior Manager of Service Development. I believe I would have to make the change to the board paper so that it reads correctly. And yes, I will admit I did have a conversation with my North Team lead, Notley, who pointed out the fact that it should have said 10 minutes and not 15 minutes.
Thank you very much.
Okay.
Great. Any more questions or comments from board members? Director Deschel, go ahead.
You're on mute.
Yeah, we can't hear you. It doesn't indicate you're muted, but we can't. Hear you. There you go.
I'm called in and I muted my own phone just to be extra sure I wasn't going to get any errant comments in there. But I'd like to move to amend the recommended action to add the following sentence after the word changes. General manager and CEO and or her designee shall exercise best efforts to cooperate with General manager, CEO and or her designee shall exercise best efforts to adjust the start date for the August service changes to take effect prior to the affected student's first day of school.
Great. So Director Deschel has just made a motion to amend with the language he's stated. Do we have a second?
I'm happy to second it.
Director Lewis, a second.
Oh,
Great.
sorry.
I got Director Bouquet as the second. Is there any discussion on the amendment, Director Geisinger?
Yeah, I have a question. I think it's probably for Jesse Carter. I think most of the school trippers and the changes that I've seen, at least in my area, are in terms of frequency. Is that the case for all of them? Are there buses that, I mean, can the kids get to school just not, it just takes, it might have 15 or 30 minute headways, or is it totally new service in some cases?
It really depends on the school district and the school. So for instance, as you mentioned in Boulder, where frequency goes up and it's still the same pattern of service, in other areas, the trippers actually originate and terminate in different spots. So for example, the Route 65, which goes by GW and TJ High School in the city of Denver, those trips originate and terminate in different places. I do want to make sure that the board understands, and I have to thank General Manager Johnson for pointing the fact out that any change in this date actually affects the voting process, the pay process, and the availability of the work types for our union workers. So we work towards these set dates with a very short period in mind of actually putting together all the information. We would certainly have to contact both payroll and the union leadership to make any changes that change the date of this particular run board. So I just want to make sure that that's stated.
I just make a comment. I certainly share Director Deschelle's concern about getting kids to school and doing that from day one. At the same time, August is going to be complex because it's Zero Fair month, and I think it will be juggling staff and resources already with some of that. So I'm a little bit hesitant to change this at the last minute and wonder if maybe it makes more sense to look at this for next year. I don't know if Ms. Johnson or anyone wants to comment on that.
Ms. Johnson, would you care to comment?
Yes, thank you very much, Mr. Chair, and thank you, Director Geisinger. As I indicated before in my previous remarks, recognizing we do have a collective bargaining unit agreement with ATU, we do call out 3 service changes per year. And while those 3 service changes give us an opportunity to adjust services, also gives us the opportunity for individuals to select the work that they do. So there could be some conversations, I can't speak for the union, whereby we talk about the timeline is in association perhaps with the commencement of the school year. That would give greater flexibility. I can't make that commitment single-handedly, but there could be some discussions recognizing that back in the day, schools would start, the Tuesday after Labor Day, at least in my era, and now they've morphed. So I think it would be quite feasible that we could engage in a discussion and we could apprise the board accordingly because it's a collective effort. Thank you.
Thanks.
Thanks for those comments. Second Vice Chair Catlin, please go ahead.
Just for clarification, I was asking for Director Deschelle to reread his proposed amendment and where in the resolution it falls.
Director Deschelle, go ahead.
Sure, not a problem. I will, with fidelity, read it as originally stated, though I'm open to adjusting the language as always. Director Callan, the intent is that this would fall after the word changes, so the recommended action, it would just be an add-on to the last sentence there. So I will read it with fidelity here, but I also am open to changing it. So it's really just that school tripper service that we care about starting, with an emphasis on that school tripper service, not the entire run board starting early. General manager and CEO and or her designee shall exercise best efforts to adjust the start date of the August service changes to take effect prior to the affected student's first day of school, or said differently or slightly differently, which I may have to withdraw and resubmit. But general manager and CEO or her designee shall exercise best efforts to adjust the start date for the school tripper August service changes to take effect prior to the affected student's first day of school.
Ms. Johnson?
Thank you once again for a third bite at the apple. One other piece of information that I feel is very important as we talk about our people power and needing to have self-care. This also impacts bid vacations. Individuals bid on their vacations when they have shift work. So recognizing that people have bid well in advance about what days they would take off. I just needed to manage your expectations around that people power aspect that doesn't deal with just normal call outs. So thank you very much.
Thanks for that clarification. Director Rosenthal.
Yeah, I'm curious, and I'm not asking for an answer, but just sort of an open question. How many school districts are in the RTD area? And it's probably quite a few. And of course, we've got charter schools and online learning and things like that. So, and then, some school districts might have, like, say, a high school start before, elementary school or ECE. So I guess my concern is that this would be a Leviathan information gathering effort to try to find out who starts when, and then try to make sure that we have tripper buses allocated accordingly. Sort of an open statement and open question.
Great, thanks for that. Director Deschel.
Yeah, just to quickly respond, right? It's not every student in the district. There are maybe 10 routes that are proposed that are specific to school tripper service. And I've gone ahead and done that due diligence to realize that these are Denver Public Schools, Boulder Valley School District, and possibly Sheridan 12. So it's not, Director Rosenthal, I think, to assuage your concern, saying all school districts, all service provided, right? But it's really targeted at the service changes we make intentionally for schools to get those kids to school.
Great, thanks for that. So we've got an amendment. So I'm going to ask Director Deschel for clarification. You proposed an amendment and then a subsequent amendment that had a change in language. Which would you like to go with? And we'll ask your second.
I'll go with the school tripper language. So general manager and CEO and/or her designee shall exercise best efforts to adjust the start date for the school tripper August service changes to take effect prior to the affected student's first day of school.
Great. And Director Bouquet is the second to that. Are you okay with that language?
Yes, I am.
Great. Okay. So we're going to take a vote on the amending language at this point in time. Ms. McManus, can you call the roll?
Yes, thank you, Chair. Director Bouquet,
Yes.
Director Broom,
No.
Director Catlin,
No.
Director Cook,
No.
Director Davidson,
No.
Director Deschel,
Yes.
Director Geisinger,
No.
Director Lewis,
Yes.
Director Rivera Malpietti, Director Rosenthal,
No.
Director Sloan,
No.
Director Tisdale,
No.
Director Whitmore,
No.
Director Williams.
No.
I'll go back to Director Rivera Malpietti. And then to Chair Busick.
I'm a yes. So with that, we've got 10 no's, 4 yes votes, 1 absent. That was Director Rivera Malpietti. I'm not going to read the yeses and nos. It's part of the record. So the amendment, the language to amend the motion fails. So let's move back to the main motion. And I'll ask if we have any no votes on the main motion.
Director Tisdale. has his
I'm
hand
sorry,
up.
Director Tisdale, go right ahead.
You're on.
You're on mute,
muted,
sir.
Doug.
Thank you very much, and I appreciate your patience with me. I wanted to go back to discussion on the main motion in light of the amendment having failed, and just to point out that my no vote was not associated with disagreeing with the idea. I thought the idea was well taken, and I believe Director Deschel said that we had had discussion about this last year, and I am concerned that we didn't have the opportunity to address that more fulsomely in this scheduling change now. So I would encourage staff to take this into account when we look at the schedule for next year. Director Deschel has provided some excellent information that I think would be beneficial in responding to this. And so, as I said, the idea was good, but I voted no for the practicalities that were addressed by General Manager CEO Johnson. Thank you, sir.
Great, thanks for those comments and thanks for the clarification. We did not have discussion on the main motion. So now we're on questions, comments, and discussion on the main motion. Director Rosenthal.
Thank you. Actually, just to echo Director Tisdale, there was just not enough time to really get that amendment. I know that's going back on that issue, but otherwise I think it's a great idea that Director Deschel had. It's just not enough time, and also the issues that GM manager and CEO Johnson also mentioned that we were not able to move forward. But in any event, I do support the original motion. Thank you.
Great, thanks for those comments. Any further discussion on the main motion? Now I'll take the vote. Are there any no votes on the main motion? Seeing or hearing none, that passes unanimously. We're going to move on to the final recommended action, which is the Reimagine RTD System Optimization Plan. So I'm going to be looking for a motion for the Board of Directors to approve the Reimagine RTD System Optimization Plan, SOP, as revised and summarized in Attachment B, to serve as the service plan through 2027 and to be implemented in a phased approach at regular service changes as resources are available through that period. And do I have a motion?
I'll move. Director Williams.
Dr. Williams, is there a second?
Second, Sloan.
And Sloan is the second. How about a staff presentation on this?
Yes, thank you, Chair. This is Bill Van Meter, Assistant General Manager for Planning. And without further ado, I would like to introduce Doug Monroe, Manager of Corridor Planning Operations, and Jesse Carter, who you've heard from previously this evening, Senior Manager of Service Development. They will be making the staff presentation on the Reimagine RTD System Optimization Plan. Doug?
Thank you. So the System Optimization Plan was started as part of the Reimagine RTD effort in 2019, led by the Systems Planning Group with support from the Service Development Group. Early in the process, we established the Reimagine RTD guiding principles with the Board of Directors, and especially applicable here to the System Optimization Plan are the equity, workforce, mobility, and financial guiding principles that were established. When we set out when we first set out working on the system optimization plan, it was known that there were some constraints as far as financial at the time, especially, and we were initially looking at about a 92% of our 2019 service levels as part of the system optimization plan. Through the pandemic and the financial challenges that have arisen from that, along with our workforce challenges, that number has been revised to 85% of our pre-pandemic service is what is recommended as part of the system optimization plan. So that's 85% of pre-pandemic service, but it is 17% greater than the service we operate right now. So in beginning the process for the system optimization plan, we looked at travel patterns throughout the district using information like the location-based services data, other travel data that we could gather to best analyze where people were traveling from and to, and could best use our services to do that. As the pandemic hit, the effort for the system optimization plan and for Reimagine RTD as a whole was paused in 2020 and then resumed in 2021. We were able to take some travel data that was gathered during the pandemic and use that to release a draft system optimization plan, which came out late 2021. We initially were accepting comments for the system optimization plan through February 9th. And after gathering some feedback from this board and from some local jurisdictions and from the public as well, that deadline was actually extended to March 9th. So we got an extra month of comments. And overall, we received over 1,600 comments from members of the public, from local jurisdictions, and we used that. Taking those into account, we made a number of changes to the system optimization plan that impacted about a dozen routes that were that had their initial recommendations changed. I think big ones on that list that took some more resources to actually address implementing bidirectional service on the route FF2 in between Denver and Boulder, adding the route 122X back into the system optimization plan, and then with a lot of service from, or a lot of comments that we heard from the Arvada area, making a modification to Route 52 and 72 to provide service on Route 52 along Ralston Road, as that was their preference in the Arvada area there. So going into just some of the metrics that show the system optimization plan as an improvement over what is out there right now, and how this plan benefits the district as a whole, and addressing some of those guiding principles as well. Looking at mobility, the system optimization plan increases the population within a quarter mile of bus stops and within a half mile of rail stops from 54 to 56% of the district population, but it increases the population that has access to frequent service, and that's service that's defined as every 15 minutes or better. It increases that population from 13% to 21% of the district population. So improving mobility for, especially with frequent service, for a larger percent of the district population there. In looking at equity populations in the district, 69%, previously it was 69%, within a quarter mile of a bus stop and within half mile of a rail stop. That goes up to 71% with the system optimization plan. And then for those equity populations, that frequent service goes from 18% to 28%. And then finally, looking at employment metrics, within a quarter mile and a half mile for bus stops and rail stops respectively, it goes from 65 to 67%, but with the frequent service, that goes from 31 to 39%. So overall, an improvement in access for the general population, for equity populations, and for reaching jobs within the district, all in line with the guiding principles that were established by the board early in the Reimagine RTD process. So with that, I will turn it over to Jesse Carter, who is going to talk about the implementation process for the system optimization plan, as well as I think a little bit more, or continuing to hear about the workforce challenges that we have. So Jesse.
Okay, thanks, Doug. And one thing, well, there are a couple of things I just want to remind the board of, and that is the systems optimization plan is not a service change in and of itself. We will be following the normal process as we implement between now and 2027 with bringing proposals to the board as our resources allow. And I probably have to say that again, as our resources allow. Again, the number of operators that we have available will somewhat determine the sequence in which we actually propose the changes, actually implementing the service plan itself. So with that, I do want to just roughly describe our people power problem when we look at implementing this plan going to 2027. We have a shortfall of over 300 operators at this point in time, which is sizable. It's something that we are continuing to work on, but it's something that we have to face in order to make it a reality of being able to implement this plan. So with that, I want to turn it back to, I believe, Mr. Van Meter.
Thank you. And Chair, Board of Directors, that concludes our presentation. Brian Welch, Senior Manager of Planning Technical Services, and Bill Soroy, Senior Manager of Transit-Oriented Communities, are joining us here, and we'll take a team approach if necessary to try to answer any questions and provide any clarifications necessary that the board might wish to engage in. Thank you.
Thanks, and thanks for the presentation and for your work on this over the years. Many years, it seems like, but we've had this coming before us so many times. I'm glad we're getting toward the end. So I'm going to go to director questions and comments at this time, and I'll start with Second Vice Chair Catlin.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I just wanted to say for the record that the most recent service changes resulted in reinstating the 116X down in my area. And that was met with a lot of praise from some of my constituents because a number of them rely on that route. That has been eliminated in this system optimization plan. And I've been in contact with some developers along that route, right adjacent to our parking ride there, where the 116X passed. And there are several hundred housing units planned, multifamily or higher density units right adjacent to that park and ride, and then another fairly large development across the street. Those are currently going through the zoning process with the planning and zoning with Jefferson County. So there were some questions asked about service, transit service, and the potential for these developments to generate ridership. So I guess my question, I know the system optimization plan goes out for 7 years, whatever, but in the event of some of these higher density developments coming online, would there be some opportunities to re-examine routes such as the 116X to see if we could reinstate those routes?
Great.
Chair.
We have a response. Yes,
Yeah,
please.
Chair,
go ahead,
this
Mr.
is,
Van Meter.
thank you, Bill Van Meter, AGM Planning. So the short and sweet answer is yes. The system optimization plan is exactly that. It's a plan. It's giving us a roadmap. It's based on current understanding of our environment, our needs, our requirements, our resources. As Jesse Carter noted, 3 times a year we'll be coming to the board through our standard process that you went through earlier this evening for service changes. If there are changes in where equity populations live and work and need to travel that make it onto our radar and that warrant changes to serve an equity population, we need to be aware of that, and we have the tools and intent and resources to be able to change services to an equity population. Similarly, where there's new development that may or may not have been anticipated during the land development, during the development of the system optimization plan, we also need to be nimble. We recognize that this is a general roadmap. If we need to deviate over time, you as policymakers have that responsibility and capability, and we have, as staff, have that responsibility to track it and relate it and bring to you that information and have a continuing dialogue with you, with our stakeholders in local jurisdictions, and through our service councils that we've discussed and that are one of our responses to the accountability committee's recommendations. So we have a number of tools in the toolbox. And at the core of that is your responsibility as board members and our responsibility as staff to track these changes, to use the SOP system optimization plan as a roadmap, but not as an exacting constraint. I don't know if Jesse or Jesse put his hand up, and he may have something to add regarding this.
Right, and thanks, Bill. And I would like to add, and again, this is Jesse Carter, Senior Manager of Service Development. With routes like the 116X that have relatively weak ridership, we may want to revisit it and the area and trying to provide it with some other type of service rather than to say that it's just the 116X that's the answer to that type of service demand. So we want to leave that open as well. So it's not just a matter of saying, okay, let's explore the 116X, but perhaps we can take a look at some other types of services that could serve that new community as it comes up. So I just wanted to make sure alternatives are mentioned in looking at how our services are impacted by the SOP.
If I might, Mr. Chair, respond.
Yes, please go ahead.
Yeah, I come through all of the comments, and I want to applaud you all for your efforts in reaching out and getting the extra feedback that we asked for. And I know that the responses to those comments were that you would look at FlexRide. I think that that's probably not quite as specific as the people, you know, commenting on the 116X were asking for. So I think we need to work a little bit more. But I just wanted to say, Mr. Van Meter, your comments they reassured me that it's a guide, it's not hard and fast, and if circumstances do change, we can take another look at it. And that's really all I was asking. So I very much appreciate your response. And you too, Mr. Carter. Thank you.
Thank you. Director Deschel.
Thanks, Director Busick. This is more of a, excuse me, a request than it is a question, which is, you know, a lot of times, and increasingly so, we have many folks who say, you know, I want to help be an advocate for RTD. What do you need? And I think it would be really helpful, certainly for me, and I'm hoping and guessing for other members of the board, to understand that delta, right? It's really helpful to hear, you know, we're short approximately 300 full-time employees on the front lines. It would be really helpful to know how many short are we to get, you know, to the 2027 number, right? Is it 600? Is it 1,000? And then similarly for budget discussions, right? You know, what does this cost? What are these increased costs? And I know we can only give estimates now, but as we're trying to build coalitions and get other folks to support us, that type of information we get asked for, and I think it could help move the needle as folks advocate more broadly with us and on our behalf. Thanks.
Thanks, Ms. Johnson. Are you going to tell us that information is contained in our board briefing documents, sir?
Thank you very much, Mr. Chair, and thank you, Director Deschel, for your question. There are some elements contained in your briefing packet, but it's more specific. And so as we begin our budget preparation process, I think it's incumbent upon us to paint the full picture to manage expectations, because in the course of this dialogue, we always look at the operator, but we also know that there are a myriad of other positions that are warranted, and we'd be remiss not to look at our attrition rate. We also have to look at our attrition rate when we look at our training program as well. So while we talk about these numbers, we have to plan accordingly for people, referencing the previous discussion where we have personnel that go out and they take their well-deserved leaves, right? So as we look at it, we're always, as I've been telling the team, should be in a hiring mode, and we should have a qualified candidate pool that we could look to have what it is that we need. So as we go forward, that is something that I, in conjunction with, you know, Doug McLeod and his staff and with all the members of the leadership team, plan to have a discussion around that, because I do know there are peers around the country that have adjusted how they're providing their service delivery, modifying schedules off-peak times. And to the point Director Catlin raised as well, as we go forward, recognizing that this is a plan, it is a guide, we also have to be cognizant that there's various ways into which to deliver transit service, and it just doesn't mean a 60-foot articulated bus. It doesn't mean a 40-foot bus. It's the needs that are basically in alignment with the communities in which we're trying to provide mobility options. So that's what this is all about, with those 6 guiding principles that this body adopted back in April of 2021. We will use that first and foremost in making decisions and adhering to Title VI of the Civil Rights Act of 1964. Thank you.
Thank you. Director Deschel, anything further? No? Okay.
All set. Yeah, thanks.
Great. Thanks a lot. Director Bouquet, you're next.
Thank you very much, Chair. I guess I originally had 2 questions. I was going to wait for this one to be second, but I'm going to start off kind of based on the discussion. Based on the tactics that we're using as an agency, or the efforts that we're using as an agency, because as we all know, it's the people power problem. Are we using any metrics when it comes down to, you know, the efforts that we're using currently to try to recruit future operators or future employees, as well as attrition? I guess that's just kind of my first overall question of, you know, do we have a metric guide of, are the tactics we're using right now being effective or not? Because that seems like the biggest issue, coming down to the people power problem.
Great. Ms. Johnson?
Thank you very much, Director Bouquet. And yes, we do. As we look at our strategic plan, as we look at the third priority, which is employee engagement, there are scorecards and there are metrics as we look at this holistically, because we have to first discern what it is that we're striving for. And as I talked about, looking at the attrition rate. So when we talk about how many people we're bringing into classes, we need to know if we are attriting 20% of what we're bringing in, then we need to double that to ensure that we are making up for those individuals that feel that, being electromechanic, being a engineer, or being a engineer, being on the commuter rail operating that consist, or being a light rail operator, a bus operator may not be for them. So as we look holistically about how we're doing that, we need to manage the expectations because we invest in training, and perhaps it's what we've talked about is ensuring that we have an opportunity for people to understand what a day in the life of this position would entail. So we don't have somebody 3 weeks in after we've invested 3 weeks of training to say, I can't complete the last 5. So yes, those things are in the hopper, and it's going to take us some time, quite naturally, as we first, establish the baseline going forward and utilizing various strategies. But I want to be clear when I talk about we can leverage a myriad of different strategies, but trying to find people in this industry, in this climate, regardless of what industry, has been quite challenging, but we're trying to do our best as we move forward. So thank you very much for the question.
If I may.
Dr. Bouquet, you bet.
Thank you. And yes, we're not the only ones having this problem, and that's the hope. Do we find other agencies that see how it works or not? I guess my second question would be regarding the SOP. If I read it as a commuter, I look at it kind of two perspectives. One route on my own when it comes down to, the Route P and Route 43. And then a route I believe is in Director Busick's and Director Whitmore's, which is the 104. So kind of two-part question. The first one being is, if I'm interpreting as someone in my district and they say, oh, the Route P and the Route 483, that ride should be protected or should be in service till 2027. And then kind of the opposite, where I see the 104 is listed as not in service, but based on our map, we hope it to be in service by 2027. I guess my question is kind of regarding the first part, saying, if I'm reading how the SOP is played out right now, could the routes be listed right now be cut at any point till 2027? And then the second one is, based on our people power problem, what does the rollout look like? And I know, Mr. Carter, I've asked this question prior, but, when it comes down to phases and giving, preference to certain routes over the other, I guess it would be under ridership, but I'm happy to clarify either question too.
Who wants to handle that?
I see a couple of folks taking a step back and perhaps someone else staying in place. I'll take the first stab at it. And it was an excellent question, Director. In looking at it, I hate to use the term priority and more as I'd rather use the term the sequence in which we'll bring back services or maintain services. Of course, we're going to have to take a very hard look at the system as a whole comprehensively to make sure that we stay in line with Title VI and making sure that we're not necessarily cutting a service that has a disparate impact. And at the same time, we have to consider, the network of services and how we, mesh everything together, what types of connections are maintained or broken, and at the same time, what type of operational leverage we have offered by the services that we put out there. So when you look at a commuter-driven service like the Route P, it is more so in danger of cuts because of the nature of the services. They are peak driven, and as you may know from conversations, our commuter services are seeing lesser interest because of the CBD not being what it used to be in terms of population. So it's probably more in danger, and also the cost to our system in providing that type of service, since it's primarily peak only, has an impact as well. So yeah, I do think there are certain routes that are more vulnerable because of the nature of the service that they provide and the system requirements. However, when we go to make these service changes, again, we will be looking at it holistically and looking at the district as a whole to balance everything based on making sure that we are in compliance both with Title VI and our collective bargaining agreement. I hope that answers some of your question.
Yeah, the big part is what is listed potentially could be cut in that time. Okay, thank you.
Right.
And then the other one is just kind of the rollout of services that are on the list. And then again, as CEO GM Johnson says, how do we temper or how do we manage expectations?
Expectations, yeah.
When it comes down to, hey, I'm reading it and I'm excited about this route coming back.
Right. And I will have to say that, in service development, we're always excited to create services, and we don't want to necessarily, cut services. It's the hardest thing in the world to do. However, we do have to pay attention to the fact that ridership is different. And although we see an overall increase, we're almost to like 200,000 a day at this point. We're well above 355,000 a day. So we've got a long way to go to get back to where we were prior to COVID. But at the same time, I don't want to say or predict that, that certain services will forever have a place within a plan, because we can't say that. There may be a change that occurs that requires us to take a very hard look at the system and what we're putting out there and make changes.
Ms. Johnson, did you have something to add?
Yes, thank you very much, Mr. Carter, for that explanation. And thank you, Director Bouquet, for the question. And I just wanted to reiterate some statements in which Mr. Carter made. So as we look at this is holistic. And as many of you heard me say before, we are the RNRTD, meaning we're a regional transit provider. And we're also a mobility integrator. So as we look at things holistically, that's what I think is operative as we go forward, as we talk about what is included in the plan currently. As we all know, we wouldn't think we'd be in this position currently having these discussions. And so there's a myriad of things that could come into play as relates to where we are in 2027. So recognizing that we do have 3 service changes annually as agreed upon in our CBA going forward, we would look at that as well as the elements that Mr. Carter touched upon, not only Title VI, but also those guiding principles. So recognizing that people aren't, traveling to the central business district as they did previously, there could be a myriad of different reasons that basically cause us to do a shift. But we would have that discussion because there could be something in which we are partnering, talking about the partnerships that are such a pivotal point in all of this. When we talk about the localized services that we could leverage going forward to bridge that gap if there was a need, looking at the demand in that community in which we're serving. So thank you, Mr. Carter, very much for your explanation. And for you, for the question. Thanks.
Thank you very much.
Does that take care of your questions? Great.
Thank you.
Great. Director Cook.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Chair. I'd like to offer an amendment. And this is what Director Tisdall and I circulated a little bit earlier, but I'll go ahead and recap it. It would be to amend the recommended action to, at the end of it, delete the period, insert a comma, and then add the following language. With such process to be informed and guided by any board adopted mobility plan for the future, in parentheses MPFF, comma, which SOP and MPFF are the agency's comprehensive operations analysis and will together be reviewed and updated with board approval periodically on a no less than triennial basis to provide for a consistent and effective coordinated policy and vision for service. You're muted.
And I will second.
Very good.
And if I may speak to that motion right quick, just to explain.
Sure, Director Cook, go right ahead.
I don't think it's a big deal. This does 3 things. First of all, it makes explicit that the MPFF, the Mobility Plan for the Future, as our long-range vision for service, that comes to the board. Secondly, it kind of places the SOP in context with the Mobility Plan for the Future. And in fact, at the suggestion of GM CEO Johnson, it makes clear that that those 2 together are the agency's comprehensive operations analysis. And then third, it provides for a periodic review to just ask, to bring it to the board and say, is this meeting our needs? Are we deviating from it a lot in the way that would, as Bill Van Meter responded to Director Catlin's questions, is it doing it are we deviating so much that it in fact isn't serving as the guide that we want it to? Are the partnerships working in the way that they're structured? So anyway, it's those three things. And I don't know if Director Tisdale wants to speak to that as well.
All right, I'm going to take Director Tisdale out of turn if that's okay. Director Tisdale.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman. I appreciate that. Excuse me. From the outset, the Reimagine RTD process has always been a complex and a comprehensive process with two articulated outcomes, a system optimization plan and a mobility plan for the future. This amendment is designed to remind us of this, to keep it in the forefront of our thinking, and to respect that process. And it should be noted, this amendment does not cast anything in stone. It is flexible, as it is stated. It does not mean that there has to be a change every 3 years, but it does mean that at least every 3 years we'll stop, step back, and look, and based upon that, determine what is our best action. So I support the amendment. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Director Tisdale. So we're going to take discussion, questions, comments on the amendment only at this time, and then we'll eventually get back to discussion on the main motion. So Director Williams, I see you are up next.
I would like to speak, but I do not want to speak on the amendment. So I'm going to put my hand down and wait to come back.
Great, great. Live from Cambridge, Director Lewis, you're up next.
Thank you, Chair Busick. Just one quick question. I'm curious of the significance of 3 years. How did you all land on 3 years for this particular amendment?
Directors Cook or Tisdale, would you like to? Director Tisdale, I see you unmute. Well, you're both unmuted. Who
Actually, I'll defer to.
All right, Mr. Chairman, if I may.
You may.
Yeah, the idea was not to make it something that imposed a burden upon us to do this on an annual basis, but rather to do it on a periodic basis, but to have some context in mind. And as I said, if we do it on an at least triennial basis, we may conclude at the end of 3 years, you know what, we like the SOP the way it reads now. It's still flexible. It's still something we're working toward. We like the way, the as yet to be approved mobility plan for the future is looking. So we need to take no action. So it was simply to put in some sense of what is the periodicity with which we would act in reviewing this.
Dr. Lewis?
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Chair. So was that does the 3 years align with any of the processes that we have in place? Like, is there significance to the 3 years, or could it be 1 year? Could it be 2 years? Like, is there an opportunity for discussion around that?
Dr. Tisdale?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. The way the amendment is phrased, it is on a no less than triennial basis. So yes, the board would have flexibility should it choose to do so as a board to look at it more frequently than that.
Might I ask one more question? Thank you, Mr. Chair. Are there examples of how long the COAs are typically done that you all might have found in your research when you were bringing forth this amendment? Like what others might be doing, what that time span might be, and if anybody else might have that information, I'm curious as well.
Great. Director Tisdale, Director Cook,
or
anyone else?
I did have a chance to talk with GM CEO Johnson about this. And I'm glad that Director Tisdale clarified that we're not talking about doing a new CAO necessarily, or COA, but rather pausing to ask. But as I understand it, and she might weigh in, you normally would do a new COA every 5 to 7 years is what I had heard from her. And she can of course clarify on that too.
Ms. Johnson.
Yes, thank you very much, Director Lewis, for the question, and Director Cook for speaking to the conversation that we had. Yes, customarily in the transit industry, when one looks at a comprehensive operational analysis, it's done every 5 to 7 years. So as we look at it from a holistic vantage point, trying to look to discern whether or not the service levels are adequate in reference to development in the varying areas in which you're serving and things of the like. So from what I'm garnering from the conversation that ensued, that it's 3 years for the board to say, okay, here or where we are, and potentially there could be a need to do another COA to make modifications, you know, at 5 years, but it's a check-in. Would that be accurate?
Yes, and I would assume too that to the extent we can make tweaks or small revisions, that those would be possible without undertaking a COA. Yeah.
If I may just ask one more question, just so everybody's clear, I think this could go back to potentially what Director Lewis is asking, recognizing that this is a guiding document that goes in tandem with our established service change process, utilizing the guidelines that are already in existence. Those things can be modified accordingly to the point that was raised by, I am looking on my screen, there he is, Mr. Van Meter. And it was stated earlier, I didn't see him, I didn't want to, you know, as relates to what we would be doing customarily with service changes. Would that be correct, Mr. Van Meter?
Yeah, it's struggling to get the unmute. Yeah, this is Bill Van Meter, Assistant General Manager Planning. Yes.
Right. So I just want to make sure we're all clear. So I'm sort of playing devil's advocate, stating the obvious, so there's agreement then collectively about the position I was taking earlier when I talked about traditionally with the comprehensive operation analysis, and ours have just been branded as an SOP and a mobility plan for the future, but they're one and the same, having a short-term and a long-term visioning document.
Okay.
Thank you so much. That's all I have.
Great, Director Lewis, thanks, and thanks for those follow-up comments. First Vice Chair Geisinger, please go right ahead.
Thank you very much. And I think this is an important amendment in terms of as Johnson just said, the long-term visioning document that's, I think, critical to come to the board and to look at these two together. I may have a couple more comments, but I'm a little confused why we're calling that a comprehensive, it was the mobility plan for the future, part of the comprehensive operational analysis. I guess when I talked with you last week, Ms. Johnson, I was thinking that helped me clarify what the SOP was. And I'm no expert on this, but that seems like it doesn't really apply to the mobility plan for the future. It's not operational in the same sense.
Ms. Johnson?
Yes, thank you very much, Mr. Chair and Director Geisinger. As I was qualifying in the context of our conversation, this does fall in with the comprehensive operational analysis. As we're looking to be visionary, aspirational, how you qualified it, we're looking at our current services. So this is assessing our operations and doing an analysis. The point that I made with Director Cook when she and I spoke is recognizing that this is a document that the board is acting on in 3 years from now. We've branded it as such. So if there's different people sitting around the table, what is a mobility plan for the future? A mobility plan for the future is a comprehensive operations analysis. So that's what that language there is qualifying and clarifying for those that may not be familiar with what we have indicated as a SOP, because in the space in which we're most familiar, SOP is a standard operating procedure, but we've qualified it as a system optimization plan. So the COA moniker, the acronym that is representing a comprehensive operations analysis, provides clarity. If none of us are here and have no idea of what it is we are talking about. Does that make sense?
Yeah, it doesn't provide clarity for me, but that's probably my problem. It's okay. So I just could see the operational piece as more of the SOP, but I think putting the two together is important. A plan that looks to 2050 and looks at how we're going to put together our partnerships, what the greenhouse gas analysis is, and what our goals may be there, what the outcome is if we don't get new funding, how we look toward getting new funding. Those are all things that I do believe are very important for the board and should be informing our operations, our SOP, and all of it. So I will be supporting the amendment. Thanks.
Thanks for that. Are there any more questions, comments, or discussion with regard to the proposed amendment? Seeing none, I'm going to call for a roll call vote on the proposed amendment. The first was by Director Cook, second by Director Tisdale. Ms. McManus, can you call the roll?
Yes, thank you. Director Bouquet,
Yes.
Director Broom,
Yes.
Director Catlin,
Yes.
Director Davidson,
Yes.
Director Deschel,
Yes.
Director Geisinger,
Yes.
Director Lewis,
No.
Director Rivera Malpietti,
No.
Director Rosenthal,
Yes.
Director Sloan,
Yes.
Director Tisdale,
Yes.
Director Whitmore,
Yes.
Director Williams,
Yes.
Chair Busick.
Yes. Did we miss somebody? Because I count 14 votes.
Yeah, I'm a yes too, Shelley.
Great. So the proposed amending language passes by a vote of 13 to 2 no votes. I'm not going to read out the no. We always read the no votes. It's a matter of record. It's anyway.
And one absent.
What's that?
And one absent.
Well, I count 15 votes, so I don't think anybody.
Okay.
Great. Now we're going to go back to the main motion as amended. And Director Williams, you were first in the queue, so you go ahead.
Thank you, Chair Busick. I just have a couple of quick comments on it. I'd really like to thank Doug and Brian and Bill Soroy and Bill Van Meter and all of our staff who have been here and worked on this for some time. And it's really nice to see you all still here as we are having staffing problems. And it's nice to have some experts in the house. And in light of, and Jesse, I'm not forgetting, and Fred and Paul and everybody else who's on the call, I'd like to thank the RTD staff. And in light of managing expectations, which seems to be what we're talking about, I'd like to point out that RTD is always attempting to provide 100% of the service that we are able to provide, and that anybody who mentions a smaller number than that is not speaking for what all of us are working toward. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Director Williams. Director Davidson.
Thank you, Chair. Thought very hard about this. I just wanted to make a few comments this evening. And first of all, I really commend and really thank our staff for taking on a monumental and difficult challenge here. Travel patterns have changed, and this is a tough time in optimizing our needs and resources when I think we maybe weren't doing that in the past. There's no small task. And neither is responding to every single comment we received. So having combed through quite a few of these, I thank you for taking the time to do that and also to welcome more of those comments and to encourage them. So I want to be clear that I fully appreciate where we are here, and likewise will thank my board members in advance here for indulging me here. I want to explain why I've made the decision to vote no on the system optimization plan this evening. As a board, it's important that we ensure that our agency achieves its strategic goals holistically in a comprehensive manner. We're elected, and that comes with some weaknesses and some strengths. A weakness that we often talk about is that we run the risk of examining issues on a strictly parochial basis. But I would, and I think this is important that we call that out from time to time to make sure we're not losing the forest for the trees. But there is a beneficial flip side to this, which is given the large size of our service area, which continues, in my mind, to be one of the significant risks facing not just the agency, but the customers we serve. It's difficult to understand the entire region. And so we as represented officials can work to bring the voice of our community, particularly the customers that use our service, here to this board. And if we collectively do that and listen to one another, then we can collectively understand the needs of the entire district and, in fact, use that local lens to actually be collective. So I just wanted to highlight that my vote, there's no part of me that wants to lobby or convince anybody to vote no with me. I'm simply bringing the voice of the area that I represent. The system optimization plan, as we've been talking about, has this mid-range comprehensive operations analysis lens, and it's intended to optimize our resources. So the question I asked myself is very simply, do I believe that the system is optimized in District I? And I think that it's a hard question to answer because even within our individual districts, I'm sure we can all relate, they themselves are very different. I'm very glad that our plan has increased transit access overall throughout RTD. I would think that that means that we will collectively pass this. I'm glad that we moved from 69 to 71% for those who need the service most, but this did not happen universally. And we do have areas that are losing access to service, including people who have moved to the area or lived in the area for quite some time and had access to routes years ago, in some cases several routes, that as a result of the SOP will no longer have any access to transit. Again, my vote here is not actually a lack of confidence in the team. It's actually to highlight and a request to ask that staff and more importantly that this board really engage on this 2,300 square mile problem that we have, that by optimizing our resources, both people power and finances across the area, we've really focused on areas of high density and we've really focused on commuter routes. And there are folks that are caught in the sprawl. And I think we're all very familiar with the challenge that sprawl brings. I think we all here, I think in this group, share the interest in smart development that's conducive to transit. But I just would remind everybody that we are facing a challenge here, that while it's easy to look at buses and say, that's nearly empty, where you see 2 or 3 or 4 or 5 or even just one person on that bus, they really, really need it. And they cannot afford to leave or move elsewhere in the area. And some of them aren't there by choice or by design. And we can't go this alone. There are areas that are facing this downward spiral of service, a death by 1,000 cuts, as some have referred to it. Longmont addressed that problem years ago that they were facing by buying up service and bringing their local dollars to bear to help address this issue. It's very possible, it's very probable that other areas are going to need to do the same. I think in the mobility plan for the future, we've contemplated this idea of regional service and where RTD can focus on the R in its name and partner with our cities and counties to deliver that local and understand that local. But right now, I don't think we're being deliberate about that. We haven't specifically made hard trade-off choices in that area. So some areas are adopting that kind of a vision and plan, and some areas aren't. And I certainly don't think that 40-foot diesel buses running everywhere is the way to address this. Our flex route services, possibly innovative ones with checkpoints. I think we heard about the gun barrel route this evening. I'm sure we need to address the problems of sprawl and the folks who need this with innovative solutions like that. So again, I would just emphasize that it's not my job to drill into all the individual routes here. I'm happy to speak to the examples and the items I'm concerned about. It's tempting to listen to, the loudest voices on commuter routes or elected officials. What I'm most concerned about are folks that I have heard from that after years of this downward spiral are losing access. It's not our fault at RTD. we're trying to fund this whole thing on a 1% sales tax, and the United States has decided that roads and cars are more important than transit. Everybody in this room here, I think, is on the same team that we'd like to see a different future for transportation and our economy and our environment. I'm simply voting no because a lot of the areas that I do represent that I can bring the voice to bear have not been optimized. People have lost access, and I am asking this team here to not forget that and work together and work with me and work with the whole team and work with our community to find innovative and creative ways to solve that. Thank you for indulging me to speak for quite some time here. And again, thank you very much to the team for the very hard work, the very hard trade-offs that went into this. I don't envy the seat you've been in and that you're in right now, even listening to me ramble on. So appreciate you all very much. Thank you.
Thanks for those comments, Director Davidson. First, Vice Chair Geisinger.
Yeah, I would second that. Thanks for those very thoughtful comments and some challenges for us as we move forward. I also want to say thanks to the staff. I will be voting yes, and I appreciate all the hard work, all of the listening, and the changes that were made to respond to the public comments along the way. One question for Access-a-Ride. When we pass the SOP, are we making a decision to keep, I think right now we're at the 2019 boundaries for Access-a-Ride eligibility. What happens with that?
Who wants to address that, Ms. Johnson?
I was trying to get my hand up. I'm sorry.
Okay.
So thank you very much, Director Geisinger, for that question. Recognizing back when there was a special board meeting that preceded me in March of 2020, this board collectively decided that it was not going to impact Access-a-Ride customers, recognizing for everybody's edification that Access-a-Ride is the American with Disabilities Act complimentary paratransit service, and in such that provides, services within 3/4 of a fixed route. And so with that as a backdrop, I believe it's incumbent upon this board to decide what it wants to do relative to that, because while we do have the ADA mandated paratransit services, the board could decide that it wants to offer another type of paratransit service to incorporate that population and could qualify that as such. So as relates to where we stand now, that would be something up for the board's consideration as we go forward, because I do know, and I've had this conversation with Director Davidson electronically, that there's not clear-cut guidance as relates to where we are, in relationship to that. And so any other staff that was here would like to opine, and I see Bill Saroy's hand is up, I will yield the floor to him. Thank you.
Mr. Saroy.
Thank you, Chair, and thank you, GM CEO Johnson. This issue did come up during the course of the Reimagine the SOP process, and kind of what we just deferred to is that it is existing board policy, and we are not looking to change it. So again, if this could be up for discussion, but we are not looking to change the board policy that it adopted in 2019. So basically consistent with that, Reimagine will not propose to change it. We'll continue on until the board, if the board decides to change it, that would change the SOP and Reimagine.
So just to be clear, in 2019, we kept I think to 2021, we kept or 2020, we kept the 2019 boundaries. Were we just grandfathering people in, or if they're new people with those boundaries, can they be qualified for Access-a-Ride?
So that's the point of clarification in which I was making reference to, because when you talk about new members, right? Because when I went back to read the transcript, it indicated that we weren't going to cause any impact to existing customers. And so that's why I qualified without me being here and reading the transcript. That would be up to the board to define the policy. So Mr. Saroy, is that your understanding? I'm not trying to put you on the spot.
Yeah, that's my understanding too, yes.
Ms. Johnson or Mr. Saroy, I guess I'm interested in knowing about the options for grandfathering in people with the former boundary and also bringing in new people, but I'm hesitant to make an amendment tonight or something without more information. Do you have any recommendations on that?
I would, if I could, Director Geisinger, I would encourage you all to do some due diligence and not put forth an amendment. As we look at this holistically, I think there's a myriad of factors to take into consideration as you go forward, looking at, you know, having services. And if in fact that's outside the realm of the ADA, are we creating our own paratransit services? And what does that entail? I've had experiences working other places where we had the ADA mandated paratransit services and then had another paratransit service that actually existed prior to the ADA coming to fruition. So I think it would be in this board's best interest to, you know, do some more due diligence to see what might be feasible going forward, but recognizing right now that staff is working under the guise that this is board policy because we still are technically in the midst of a pandemic. That would be my recommendation since you asked. Thank you.
That would be my inclination as well, is we need more information. I obviously can't speak for the board, but I would be interested in learning more. I guess just a couple more comments. You know, I've always liked the statement, and I think it overstates it, but Eisenhower said planning is everything, plans are nothing. Again, I think he overstates it, but I think the idea is that so much work goes into this with a lot of due diligence, a lot of preparation. And I think it's great, but I was also pleased to hear some of the responses tonight from Mr. Van Meter and others about, you know, suggesting that we're moving forward, but also we're listening to our service planners. And I assume with our service standards that they're still in place. I guess that's a question. And you mentioned, I think, Bill Van Meter, that, you know, you'd be looking at changes based on, you know, effects on equity, population, and new development. There are some pieces that are in progress, I think, discussions about the 128 and whether there's a flex ride there, bidirectional service on the FF4, which I think makes a lot of sense with interlining just to make it work. The 122X, and just, you know, I guess I'm encouraged with all of that and hope that looking at ridership and as well, that we'll use this as a good solid plan, something people can rely on. And I'm happy to hear we're being flexible. Thanks.
Thank you, First Vice Chair Geisinger. Director Cook, you're next.
Thanks, and thanks for the chance to talk again. You know, I hear Director Davidson's concerns, and in fact, if you look at big swaths of the district I represent, they don't have any service. There's no hope for service, except perhaps with the partnerships. But I'm going to support the motion for a couple of key reasons, and one is the driving need I see right now is to address our financial situation, and several of the people who spoke at public comment referred to that. You know, we had been in a structural deficit mode for some time, and we just have to right that. And secondly, and this again has been comments we've received, we have to get the service we're providing right. We have to address workforce issues. We need to improve our ability to maintain our vehicles so that they're reliable. We need to increase safety and security. And that also is supported by a smaller footprint, service footprint. So I think for the near term, that's, you know, the bitter pill we have to swallow. And again, I'm looking to the partnerships and other components of the mobility plan for the future to help bring in some creativity and allow us to leverage our funds in order to create some service opportunities in areas that we're not going to be able to do ourselves. So thank you very much.
Thanks, Director Cook. Director Broom.
Thank you, Chair. I just share a couple thoughts. I'm concerned that as a board, we keep piling more expectations for service onto staff that they don't have the resources to deliver. And we end up delivering service that's less than optimal. An example of that would be, I saw some news article about 100 people were stuck out at Denver International Airport about 11:30 at night because they didn't have operators there. You know, you can't do that very many times to a customer and keep them as a customer. So maybe we need to have a little more flex in our system and be reliable, as opposed to trying to maximize every last quarter to provide service in the entire district. We need to spend some time looking at that trade-off because poor service, is not going to lead us to getting all of our customers back on our system. Thank you.
Thanks, Director Broom. Director Davidson?
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Chair. Thank you for the opportunity to speak again. I promise I'll be more brief this time. First of all, Director Broom, Director Cook, thank you for those comments about, I'm very happy that we have as a strategic priority customer excellence. Couldn't agree more that we need to get the service right, I think, as Director Cook put it, and part of why I thought very hard about how to approach this. I did just want to second the line of thinking around Access-a-Ride. The Director Geisinger was asking about, and thank you for those questions, and thank you from staff for clarification. My understanding of that discussion in that 2020 policy to maintain those 2019 levels was with regards to suspended routes. And given that we do have eliminated routes, at least getting some clarity and looking forward where there are areas that we're rolling back a little bit, I just wanted to second I'd like for us to investigate that and dig deeper in the weeks and months ahead. Just thank you.
Thanks for those comments. Any other comments or questions? Okay, it's my turn. So I seem to remember in 2019, the kind of subtle kickoff of this whole process when we had somebody named Jarrett Walker come before us and make a presentation. And I even bought his book and read it. And I wasn't impressed for a number of reasons, because he seemed to indicate that this issue, the issue of ridership versus coverage, is a simple one to resolve. And boards are just going to always push back, but it's really just simple. And you put all of your resources where your ridership is and you're good to go. I'm sure that's probably not all he said, but that was my take on what he said. And it's not that simple, right? I mean, somebody mentioned here tonight, the R in our name is regional. And if you don't have a whole system, you don't have any system. So I disagreed with Mr. Walker, and I expressed my views there. When Reimagine was kicked off, I participated and made comments and kicking and screaming. And like Nikita Khrushchev, I took my shoe off a couple of times and pounded it on the desk. But so I've come kicking and screaming along in this process. But I think that, what the saving grace for me is the fact that it's a work in progress. It's a living document. It's got some flexibility. And with the amendment of Directors Cook and Tisdale, we'll be assured of looking back at this and not just forgetting all about it. I have to go back to some of the problems that this tries to address. And a big one is our financial situation. And I'll have to say, Director Broom, I continue to repeat your statement from long ago that RTD needs a consistent and reliable source of funding. And having this sales tax funding and the roller coaster of income that it brings in is problematic. And I refer now to the July 26, 2022 memo from Mr. Van Meter through Ms. Johnson, the Reimagine RTD June 15, 2022 board study session follow-up that we received this morning. Fantastic memo. And here's something to think about. The Congressional Budget Office recently published data showing that on a national level, state government support accounts for 23% of U.S. transit agency operating resources. Colorado's state government provides less than 1% of annual recurring operating support for RTD. So there you go. That says a lot, and maybe that's something we need to work on. Maybe that's the first partnership we need to really try to repair and make better. So in any event, I concur in a lot of what Director Davidson said. And one of the things that strikes me the most is we look at when we talk about Title VI stuff, we kind of focus on where our equity populations and our transit dependent populations live, and they don't live in the same concentrations that they used to before. And Director Davison, you brought this up at a meeting recently that development has dispersed a lot of these populations, and the term you used that I thought was brilliant is they're now sprinkled throughout the region. And so if you cut back suburban routes and services too much, you're really impacting those people. So I know moving forward, we're going to keep thinking about those people no matter where they're located, and making sure that they have transit. So those are my comments. And at this point, I am going to ask Ms. McManus to call the roll on the main motion as amended.
Thank you. Director Bouquet,
Yes.
Director Broom,
A reluctant yes.
Director Catlin,
Yes.
Director Cook,
Yes.
Director Davidson,
No.
Director Deschel,
Yes.
Director Geisinger,
Yes.
Director Lewis,
Yes.
Director Rivera Malpiedi,
Yes.
Director Rosenthal,
Yes.
Director Sloan,
Yes.
Director Tisdale,
Yes.
Director Whitmore,
Yes.
Director Williams,
Yes.
Chair Busick.
I'm a yes also, so that passes 14 to 1. Great discussion. Let's keep the discussion going. This is really important. So good work. Next is other matters. Are there any other matters to come before the board in this special board meeting? Director Broom, you've still got your hand up. Do you have anything, or is that from before?
No, I don't. Sorry about that.
Okay, great. Seeing no other discussion, I'm going to entertain a motion. Oh, I'm sorry, Director Deschel. Go ahead.
Yeah, I just wanted to make sure and remind folks we have a fantastic, as we talk about service and service delivery and getting more folks on buses and opportunities for partnership with the state. We have a fantastic press conference on Thursday morning that I hope to see folks at, to the extent people are able to make it. I know that there are some competing events, but given the importance of our state partnership, I'm hopeful to see some more directors and there to be supportive of that work that we are all engaged in. And thank you to those of you who were engaged during the legislative process to get this one across the finish line. Should be great. Without having the exact details in front of me, I'm not going to state them, but I believe it's 10:30 Thursday morning. And other than that, at Union Station, and otherwise it's been well advertised, and hope to see folks there.
Thank you, Director Deschel. Director Williams.
Yeah, I just want to say that some of us who can't be there are at a sustainability conference looking at the big picture for the region. And we would love to be at Union Station, but we can't be in two places at one time, even with great public transportation.
Thanks, Director Williams. Any other matters to come before the board? Seeing none, I will now entertain a motion to adjourn.
So moved, Director Williams.
I have Williams and Tisdale. Are there any no votes? Seeing no votes, we're adjourned 10 minutes until the next board meeting, 10. So 7:40, let's call it 7:40, 7:40. Okay, it's 7:40 p.m. I will now call the Tuesday, July 26th regular board meeting to order, and it is 7:41. Are we recording?
Yes.
Okay. Cool. Sounds good. I'm going to respectfully once again ask everybody to remain muted unless you're recognized to speak. And as you know, the meetings of the RTD Board of Directors are being held remotely in the interest of public health, safety, and welfare. The official meetings of the Board of Directors will be held via Zoom and will be audio and video recorded. The meeting recordings, along with the unofficial minutes of the meeting, will be posted as soon as practicable on the board's website. Visit rtd-denver.com. And a live stream of this meeting is also available via RTD's YouTube page. You know the civility statement. I read it once. I'm not going to read it again. Next is the Pledge of Allegiance. Who's doing that? I can't remember. Is it? I asked somebody to do that. Director Geisinger is waving her hand. She's eager to do it. Director Geisinger, can you please lead us in the Pledge of Allegiance? You're muted, but
Sorry. I pledge allegiance.
Pledge allegiance to the flag
of the United
States of America
and to the republic
for which it stands,
one
nation,
under
God,
indivisible,
with liberty and justice for all.
A metronome next time, but thank you very much. Director Williams, you're going to read the land acknowledgement if you please. Thank you.
Be happy to do that, Chair Busick. The RTD Board of Directors acknowledges that the land on which our buses and trains operate is the traditional territory of the Ute, Cheyenne, Arapaho, and other contemporary tribal nations that are historically tied to these lands. We honor our Indigenous elders who have traveled, inhabited, and stewarded these mountains, hills, and plains throughout generations. May this acknowledgement demonstrate a commitment to working to dismantle the ongoing legacies of inequity of the Native and all historically oppressed peoples, and recognize their current and future contributions in the district as we move forward.
Thank you, Director Williams, for that. Ms. McManus, would you please call the roll?
Yes, thank you. Director Bouquet,
Present.
Director Broom,
Present.
Director Catlin,
Here.
Director Cook,
Here.
Director Davidson,
Here.
Director Deschel, Director Geisinger,
Here.
Director Lewis,
Present.
Director Rivera Malpietti,
Here.
Director Rosenthal,
Present.
Director Sloan,
Here.
Director Tisdale,
Present.
Director Whitmore,
Present.
Director Williams,
I'm still here.
Chair Busick. Thank you. You're muted, Chair.
With 15 present and 0 absent, we do have a quorum. Next is retiree awards. There are no retiree awards for this evening. Third quarter retiree awards will be announced at the September Board of Directors meeting. Next is public participation. It's open to anyone who would like to address the board. If you wish to speak and have not already done so, please raise your virtual hand or press *9 on your phone. Staff will unmute you when it is your turn to speak. If you are dialed in, press *6 to toggle your mute settings. Please bear in mind that by participating in this process, you are being recorded. If you do not wish to be recorded, then your comments will have to be submitted in writing. If any speaker has documentation or reference materials for the board, or if any member of the public would like to submit written comments, please email those materials to the board office at rtd.boardoffice@rtd-denver.com. During this time, the board will not offer comments or responses Directors or staff may contact speakers following their comments if they raise matters that lend themselves to follow-up. Speakers should begin their remarks by stating their names, and they will have up to 3 minutes to provide their comments. Ms. McManus, has anyone raised their hands?
I see no hands raised.
Great. And did we have any email comments received for this meeting?
No, we did not.
Seeing no participants in the queue, we're going to close the public participation period at this time and move on to external entities reports. We have the Access-a-Ride Paratransit Advisory Committee, the APAC report, and it will be presented by Tex Elam. Mr. Elam, the floor is yours, and thank you for staying with us.
A pleasure. My report will be much shorter because Mr. Ford covered so much of the material in his presentation. But even some of those things I need to mention because he was talking about financial, I will be talking about operational. RTD has changed its scheduling software provider from Route Match to QRide to try and improve the quality of the customer service with a better system providing better productivity. The Uber pilot project, the only comment I make is that it is now the Access on Demand program. Mr. Ford covered most of the material relating to it. And so my observation simply is that it is so successful. And one of the reasons that was passed over slightly is important in that if you're using that service, you make your phone call to an Uber driver and the connection is complete. In our regular service, what happens is you have to make your reservation at least a day ahead because of the complexity of combining and coordinating service. This, of course, is terribly attractive to those of us who use it. And so it is not only popular, but I expect that this will become a very important operation for RTD. Next, a service called subscription service has now been reinstated. It had to be canceled, as many did during the COVID situation. The service is intended for those who travel at least 3 days a week to the same location on the same day and time. By removing this service, by providing this service, we remove the need for people to call in every day for the same route, and we remove the necessity for the people in the center to have to deal with it. Staff has updated the reconfiguration process, and therefore those people who are on permanent disabling condition will do a less vigorous reappraisal every several years because of the obviousness of their condition. It'll be after a person's been associated with the situation for about 7 years. So it's just an announcement. The August zero fare for better air, of course, will affect the people in Access-a-Ride. However, it's important to note, which is why I mention it, that the people who are using Uber and Access-a-Cab will be relieved of the $2 to $5 fee that usually is picked up by RTD, but not relieved of the remainder of the fare, which is being provided by a third party. And the application for vendors for the new services contracts, as you know, the new contracts will go into effect now on January 1st. And so they have to be in, the vendors have to provide them by August the 10th. And then just a last announcement, which is that the RTD has extended its appreciation for the commitment and contributions of we 5 who are leaving our posts because our terms will expire on August the 31st. They are Ann Panay, Brian Novak, Jennifer Fires from Rocky Mountain Human Services, Merv Martin, and me, Tex Elam. RTD has reviewed 20 applications for new APAC members. New member terms will start on September 1st and end on August 31st of 2025. And an observation, which is, as although these are fixed dates, life considerably changes that as time goes on. For instance, I'm on a 1-year term. I'm finishing the term of a person who left after 2 years of service. The way it's structured, any of us who take up the role of a person who leaves in the first or second year are limited to that term provided. Mr. Chairman and Board, it's been my honor and pleasure to make these presentations to you, and as a matter of fact, to serve RTD in various roles for the last 20 years. Thank you very much.
Mr. Elam, thank you for your report and thank you for your service. Thanks also to Ann, Brian, Jennifer, and Merv for their service as well. We can't do it without you. Are there any questions or comments for Mr. Elam? Seeing none, thank you, Mr. Elam. Thanks for sticking around and thanks for all of your service to RTD. Next is the Advisory Committee for People with Disabilities, ACPD report, and the Citizens Advisory Committee, CAC report, but these will be presented in September. I just want to make note that last Wednesday, the 20th of July, the CAC held an in-person meeting for the first time in sometime, I suppose, at the Denver Chamber of Commerce. First Vice Chair Geisinger, myself, Director Bouquet, Director Tisdale, and Director Williams virtually were present at that meeting. I think, were there any other directors there? I'm not sure. It was great turnout from RTD. GM CEO Johnson was there. Brandon Figliolino from our communications department was there. Catalyst, our new local government relations crew, was there as well. And had great discussion, and I encourage any members of the board in the future to attend any of the CAC meetings in person when they're held. So that being said, I'm going to move on to the Audit Ad Hoc Committee report. Director Catlin, please share with us your report, if any.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. We had a kickoff meeting with our consultant for internal audit function, Ruben Brown, on the 18th, just a little over a week ago. And we were introduced to the internal audit team. Each of the members described their roles. They have a really broad representation of different areas that they can provide to RTD with audit expertise. They they did emphasize that their work was going to be collaborative and not prescriptive. And I think that reassured me a great deal that we can really work through some of these issues together. We did refer back to the IIA definition of internal audit function, and I think that's a pretty good guiding definition for us to operate. They did suggest some audit committee composition, and we had a discussion around that. And we actually asked them to come back to us and provide some different options with pros and cons. So we gave them a little bit of homework. I also would like to acknowledge that Directors Geisinger and Tisdale participated in that initial kickoff meeting. So thank you very much for that. And I believe all directors did receive the packet information. The team came back yesterday on the 25th, and they did present 3 different options for committee composition, audit committee composition. And they presented pros and cons of each. And we had a pretty robust discussion. It was quite each of the options. It ranged from the very basic, what we're doing now, which is the ad hoc audit committee, and continuing that on to a much more leaner and mostly external committee of 3 members. And then the third option they presented was kind of a hybrid. And that was a hybrid of 2 board members for a 2-year term each, and then outside expertise of 3 audit committee members. And I think that we reached a consensus that we would eventually like to move toward option 3, but then it might take some interim steps to get there. So we did ask them to come back to us and provide some attributes and position descriptions for the external expertise that we were seeking. And first and foremost, we wanted to get a person with financial expertise on there. So they're going to be bringing back a list of attributes for candidates, as well as a process for soliciting some of these candidates. They're targeting the end of October to have an audit committee in place. But in the meantime, they would like to kind of refresh the risk assessment that they had presented to us a number of months ago. And that being said, they wanted to not only refresh that risk assessment, but they would like to survey all of the board members, and if desired, have 2-on-1 meetings with them to really get clarification on what each board member sees as the risks. And also refreshing it because perhaps staff has changed over, and some of the risks may not be as pronounced. So they will be reaching out to you very shortly, and I look forward to having you participate to the extent possible. There will be board action required on a number of these things. We'll be working on a charter as we move toward developing the new audit committee, and also the selection of the committee will require board approval. And so we anticipate doing those things as we move through these activities in September. So with that, it's a rather lengthy report. We will be meeting again in 2 weeks to discuss some of the attributes of the external audit committee members that we may bring on board. I'd like to ask either Director Davidson or Director Deschel if they have anything to add. If I missed anything.
Director Davidson, go ahead.
Yeah, thank you very much, Committee Chair Catlin and Chair Busick. Yeah, I just would echo I think please keep an eye out for that the solicitation of feedback on being surveyed for risk assessment. I think this is the opportunity. We need to move pretty quickly to get the board's input on the risk universe. So keep an eye out for that. I'm excited that we're at a place where we can get everyone's involvement here. And just wanted to say thank you very much to Director Catlin. I'm very happy with the direction we're moving right now. I think we're making really good progress, and thank you very much to our staff for pushing hard on making this happen. Doug McLeod's been very helpful in keeping this organized and moving. And of course, Ms. Johnson, thank you for the sense of urgency around this issue and moving this forward. And lastly, I would just say, I emphasize that recognizing that we do have August where we will not be meeting as a board of directors, and that October is the time frame to really move forward with our audit committee and recruitment efforts. We're going to have to be taking some action in September. So please, if there's any questions that anyone has here, recognizing that we'll have to move kind of, with some urgency, feel free to reach out to any of us on the ad hoc committee for clarification questions, any of the actions that are coming, and certainly happy to fill in any gaps and help catch folks up ahead of those forthcoming actions. So thank you.
Thank you, Director Davidson. Yeah, September is going to be a busy month. And out of respect for planned time off and others for our staff, we want to try and be very respectful and minimize the activities that we have in August. So we will be having a meeting August 8th, but I think moving forward in August, we'll try and minimize that.
Great. Director Deschel?
Yeah, thanks so much. And I know nothing catches headlines like audit, but it is so critical, and a number of the issues and challenges that we talk about here as a board and end up in some of those more contentious places, I think could have been mitigated through a strong internal audit, through a stronger internal audit. So I'm very excited about this, and we'll just read the definition that roots us in what internal audit is, which is, per the IIA, the Institute of Internal Auditors, it is an independent, objective assurance and consulting activity designed to add value and improve an organization's operations. It helps an organization accomplish its objectives by bringing a systematic, disciplined approach to evaluate and improve the effectiveness of risk management, control, and government processes. So as a board, it is really critical. Well, I know it isn't the most exciting. Please don't hesitate to reach out, because September is going to be really busy with a lot of exciting things to help, not only while we think about sort of those future, more idealistic plans, but also on our end, on the back end, what are we doing to help mitigate risk, be intelligent about our spending so that we can achieve those goals. It's all sort of interrelated.
Thanks for those comments. Second Vice Chair Catlin, does that conclude your report?
That does, Mr. Chair. Thank you.
Thanks to you, Director Davidson, Director Deschel, for your work on the committee. Next is the Tabor Ad Hoc Committee report. Directors Cook and Broom, do you have anything you would like to report at this time?
Nothing new from this end. Thank you.
Director Cook? Anything?
Right, we didn't meet this month. Thank you.
Great, thanks for that. Next is the Finance and Planning Committee report. Committee Chair Davidson, do you have anything you would like to report?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I'll keep it very brief because the bulk of the recommended actions are not on the unanimous consent agenda this evening. We met on July 12th. We did not have any public comment or information from external entities. We did have 3 recommended actions. The first was with regards to the 2014A certificates of participation refinancing. We did have a robust discussion around this, very, very much appreciative to our staff, Mr. Doug McLeod, Mr. Brendan Morgan, and augmented by Mr. Michael Newman, who's here this evening as well. I think we'll be hearing more on that. It's quite a bit to look at and consider there. A number of us were interested in not having that on the unanimous consent agenda, simply so we could make sure that that gets the full board look and a full explanation this evening. We also had a recommended action regarding the General Election Day 2022 Zero Fare and Ballot Drop Box deployment partnerships. Again, that is not on the unanimous consent agenda, so we'll be hearing more about that this evening. We did get a presentation from our Government Relations Officer Michael Davies, as well as the financial implications presented by Mr. Doug McLeod, where we learned a little bit about the cost and how that was calculated. I think we'll hear more this evening. And then finally, on the unanimous consent agenda, I think the only one, we did move forward with the contract amendment for the Platte boiler project to increase the budget there. I should have noted that on the certificates of participation refinancing, that passed committee with 7 yes, 0 no. The general election day zero fair passed the committee with 5 yes and 2 no. And the contract amendment that's on the unanimous consent did pass 7-0 for the boilerplate, or sorry, boiler replacement. And then we did have one discussion item. We did hear from the team, from Mr. Doug McLeod, about our midterm financial plan for 2023 to 2028, some helpful context and some teasers of things to come. I certainly would welcome my colleagues here to go and listen to that discussion. If you want to grab that video and skip to that portion, I think there's some really nice highlights of what's coming. So thank you, Mr. Chair. That concludes my report.
Thank you, Director Davidson. Next is the Operations and Safety Committee report. Committee Chair Rosenthal, do you have anything you'd like to report?
No, I do not, Mr. Chair. We were slated to meet on July 13. We did not hold our meeting, so all those agenda items were heard today, and so that is it.
Great, thanks very much. Performance Committee, Committee Chair Lewis, do you have anything you'd like to report? Director Lewis, your video is frozen and your audio is coming in and out. Still can't hear you. I'm going to turn, if it's okay, to your. Oh, are you there? I can see you moving now. She's alive.
I'm here, but Director Deschel can answer it if you can't hear me. I'm so sorry.
Director Deschel, would you like to?
Thanks, Director Lewis, and thanks, Director Busick, or Chair Busick. The Performance Committee met on July 13th at 1:30 p.m. We held a brief meeting in which we discussed the evaluation of board performance, because while we are charged with managing the general manager and CEO's performance, it's important that we also look inwards, as board performance can have a direct impact on the GM and CEO's ability to do her job. We had a variety of different comments from folks. Director Ravel Malpiedi, who was not on the committee, was in attendance, and I believe there may have been 1 or 2 other folks who were not on the committee in attendance. Director Whitmore, and if any of the other committee members have anything to add, please feel free. I think it's something to continue to think through. It's a thorny issue, especially as electeds, where the ultimate accountability lies with the voters. Our next meeting is September 14th, 2022, and I will yield to any fellow committee members who wanted to chime in, and if none others, I'll yield back to the chair.
Director Sloan, Secretary Sloan, go ahead.
Yes, a good report, Director Deschel, but I would like to note that one thing came out of the discussion was a close relationship between the ad hoc audit committee and the idea of an internal evaluation of the board members. And that was one reason it was put aside for further discussion. And I think from Director Callan's report tonight, you can see how it is something that will be coming up with the internal audit function as it goes forward.
Great, thanks for those comments. Anybody else?
Thank you, Director Sloan, because that was because I sit on both committees, I missed the providing that link for everyone. But yes, that was the end, which is the board, audit acknowledges that the board is one of the larger risks to the agency. It seemed appropriate to funnel it through that channel. So I yield.
Great. Director Lewis, anything further? Great. Thanks for the report. Next is the approval of board meeting minutes and committee reports. The board and committee minutes were included in the board packet. Are there any corrections from the directors? Unless there's an objection to considering these minutes all at the same time, may I please have a motion to approve the minutes for the following meetings? June 28, 2022 board meeting, July 12, 2022 Finance and Planning Committee, July 13, 2022 Performance Committee, and July 21, 2022 Executive Committee. Do I have a motion?
So moved, Tisdale.
Tisdale, second.
Williams,
Second, Director Davis.
I see Bouquet. So I've got Tisdale as the movement and Bouquet as the second. Any further discussion on the motion to approve? Are there any no votes? Seeing none, this passes 15-0. Next is the chair's report. I'll start out with the Director Deschel touched on this, the press conference coming up on Thursday, 10:30 a.m., the Denver Union Station near track 6. So any members of the board that can be there, I know some people have conflicts, I appreciate that. Any members of the board that can be there, a large board presence would certainly be appreciated. We're going to have Senator Faith Winter, Representative Matt Gray, Bud Starker, Metro Mayor's Caucus Chair and the Wheat Ridge Mayor, Doug Rex, the DRCOG Executive Director, Dominique Gomez from the Colorado Energy Office, she's a Deputy Director, Lance Langabon from the ATU 1001, and then we're going to have the big kickoff and launch of Fare Free. I'm sorry, did I say Fare Free, GM CEO Johnson? I'm sorry, Zero Fare for Better Air. So that's coming up on Thursday. So be there and be square. Couple things. First of all, just a gentle reminder, now that we have switched to the smaller committees, it's really imperative that we try to attend our committee meetings when we can. And when we cannot, please give as much notice as possible to our board staff who can make whatever arrangements might be necessary to accommodate absences. I know I'm traveling in August and September, and I let the board office know in February. So really let the board office know these things. It's really important that we do that. A couple of other things, the ad hoc zero emission vehicle committee is meeting. You guys have your first meeting scheduled. I'm excited to hear what comes out of that. This will start kicking off this Saturday is the APTA Transit Board member conference, and it's also the Transit Board Administrator Conference in beautiful downtown Salt Lake City, Utah. I know a number of directors will be attending. Our very own Director Doug Tisdale is the chair of the APTA Transit Board Members Committee and has really taken charge of organizing this entire conference, and it will prove to be a tremendous success. I will be on a panel on August 1st presenting, the topic is our security challenges and what we're doing to address those. And it was also alluded to earlier that the August is no board meetings, no standing committee meetings. This gives staff time to regroup, and a lot of them probably are taking some time off too. So be cognizant and respectful of that as you make demands on our board office staff and other staff members. So keep that in mind. The executive committee meeting was held last week. The big discussion item was something that's coming up later, and that is the amendment to the delegation of authority. And I'm going to give everyone a preview. I'm going to be moving to postpone it. So anyway, it's a preview. Stay tuned. And that's all I have at this time. Next is the general manager's report. General Manager Johnson, would you please share with us your report?
Yes, thank you very kindly, Mr. Chair, and good evening once again to you and all the board members and to those that are virtually assembled. As introduced, I am Deborah Johnson, the General Manager and CEO. This evening, I will share with you the following information centered around our strategic priorities. Speaking to community value, I will briefly discuss staff efforts to prepare for RTD's Zero Fare for Better Air initiative, which commences in less than 1 week. agency efforts to coordinate with external entities on low and no emission bus technology implementation. Further, I will share information regarding speaking engagements and other external meetings in which I have participated on behalf of the agency. As relates to employee ownership, I will touch upon the agency's ongoing COVID-19 pandemic responses. And lastly, regarding financial success, I will share a long anticipated update regarding the agency's credit risk premium associated with the 2010 Railroad Rehabilitation and Improvement Financing Loan for the Denver Union Station project. Zero Air for Better Air has been referenced a lot this evening, so wanted to provide just some updates as to where we are in ensuring this comes to fruition. RTD's application for Zero Fare for Better Air has been accepted by the Colorado Energy Office. The award to the agency is $8,680,000, which is approximately $150,000 less than RTD's request, as the Energy Office stated that the customer survey is not an eligible expense. I know the chair commented on this, but I'd be remiss in stating that as a government relations discussion item last week, we talked about the executive committee. In the course of the executive committee, it was my intent to have the agency incur the survey expense. However, at this juncture, contingent upon what happens in reference to your deliberations this evening, that leveraging a survey may not be feasible contingent upon the board's consideration and adoption of the amendment to the delegation of authority, as there is not adequate time for the board to review and consider the surveying methodology prior to Zero Fare for Better Air, which launches on Monday, August 1st. Staff is actively working with the Colorado Energy Office to complete a statement of work agreement that will facilitate the reimbursement of the eligible fares and expenses. And as noted previously, we know this launches on Monday. And as you have heard from the chair, that I, as well as most of you all and staff and other stakeholders, will participate in a media event. And it's also a community-based event to educate and inform a myriad of audiences on how to utilize the system, adherence to our code of conduct, ensuring that there is an understanding. Our expectation is that the general public will treat our stellar employees with kindness and respect, and also, of course, leveraging the opportunity to recruit employees for the Regional Transportation District. As it relates to efforts regarding low and no bus emissions technology, during the recent study session revolving around that subject on June 7th, I noted that staff would be engaging with the Colorado Clean Transit Enterprise Board of Directors regarding RTD's experience implementing and operating low and no emission buses. Assistant General Manager of Bus Operations, Fred Worthen, presented to this group on July 13th. The Clean Transit Enterprise, which is housed within the Colorado Department of Transportation, was created by SB 21-260 and is charged with distributing funding through grants to support transitioning transit to low and no emission bus technology throughout the state. As a national leader in this space with respect to implementation of zero emission bus operations, it's important for RTD to actively participate in the Clean Transit Enterprises activities. We've heard about APTA this evening. I would like to share on Wednesday, June 29th, I, as a member of the APTA Awards Committee, traveled to Chicago for the day to participate in deliberations to determine the honorees for this year's APTA Awards. Those individuals and agencies who receive APTA Awards are outstanding role models of excellence, leadership, and innovation, whose accomplishments have greatly advanced public transportation, demonstrating APTA's core values of leadership, integrity, excellence, diversity, inclusiveness, fairness, equity, teamwork, professionalism, and accountability. The honorees will be recognized during the awards luncheon that will take place at the Transform Annual Conference in Seattle, Washington, October 9th through the 12th. From July 9th through July 11th, I attended the 51st National Meeting and Training Conference hosted by the Conference of Minority Transportation Officials held in Fort Lauderdale. On Saturday, July 9th, I participated on a panel which highlighted how transit investment increased at a time customers were not using agency services, reinforcing the theme that ridership is not the sole metric of success, and moving forward into how leading organizations rely upon looking at measuring value over volume. On Sunday, July 10th, I participated in a CEO summit whereby my peers and I discussed issues that impact the role of the CEO, as well as hurdles, internal as well as external, that may hinder our optimal performance. On Thursday, July 14th, I, along with our Government Relations Officer, Michael Davies, met with the Region 8 Director of the U.S. Department of Health and Human Services and staff. In keeping with the department's mission to enhance the health and well-being of all Americans, the purpose of this meeting was to explore how RTD and HSS could connect in addressing the impact of current behavioral and mental health issues within and on public transit. HHS reaffirmed this is a national crisis and one in which is not indigenous to RTD. Thus, I committed to leveraging the Federal Transit Administration Region 8 into the discussion, and in turn, the HHS directors connecting our staff with those at the state level to further the conversation. Thank you to Director Sloan for making the introduction to the HHS director and for thinking outside the box with respect to addressing the societal challenges confronting not just our agency, but all agencies, but we could be a leader in this forefront. That same day, I was invited to participate on a panel hosted by the American Institute of Architects to discuss the effect of public policy on urban design, particularly with respect to Denver Union Station. I was joined on the panel by our very own architect, Ignacio Correa-Ortiz, as well as Ken Schroepel, the University of Colorado Denver's Director of Urban Design, and Andrew Iltis, Director of Economic Development at the Downtown Denver Partnership. Last Tuesday on July 9th, I attended the Black Community Partnership Lunch sponsored by 9 News, which was a gathering of thought leaders across a multitude of industries. The event was part of the station's ongoing 9 Listens campaign, and the discussion centered upon attracting and retaining employees of color to the Denver metro area. I had the opportunity to share challenges I have experienced having relocated to the metro Denver area after having lived and worked in more diverse and inclusive communities and agencies across the country. I was able to provide recommendations and strategies to emphasize the be and belonging as actions resonate more than words, and offer examples of how I cope with feeling isolated in an environment in which most people in similar roles do not look like me. And on a more personal note, I am humbled to announce that this past Thursday, July 20th, I was inducted into the International Women's Forum of Colorado. The IWF is an organization whose mission is catalyzing community to advance and accelerate economic opportunities for Colorado women and their families. And I am proud to be considered one of its newest members. Ongoing COVID-19 pandemic responses. So as we all know, Colorado and the nation continue to feel the impacts of the BA.5 COVID-19 subvariant, which health experts say is the most contagious COVID-19 strain yet identified, and which accounts for the majority of the cases identified in the United States. As of Friday, July 22nd, Colorado has experienced a 35% increase in COVID-19 cases over the prior 2 weeks, and most of the 8 counties within RTD service area remain in the medium level of community transmissibility, according to the Centers for Disease Control. On a more positive note, studies have found that the Omicron variant and its subvariants produce less severe illnesses than previous strains, resulting in fewer hospitalizations and a shorter duration of symptoms. Current protocols regarding masking, building capacity limitations, and other health protocols remain unchanged, and the leadership team and I continue to monitor health data and state and federal health and safety guidance. And last, but certainly not least, as the board members learned yesterday, I am immensely pleased to announce that as of Monday, July 25th, the agency's finance staff finally received a payment from the U.S. Treasury for the agency's credit risk premium for the 2010 Railroad Rehabilitation and Improvement Financing Loan for the Denver Union Station project. The transfer was in the amount of $30.6 million, $1.7 million of which is derived from interest. Moreover, I contacted the mayor's staff yesterday, being the Denver mayor, Mayor Hancock, to apprise and further the conversation with the city regarding Denver Union Station enhancements to sustain a welcome transit environment. Doug McLeod, our CFO, is in contact with Denver's acting CFO on this matter. Thank you, because I know this preceded me. Thanks to all of you our federal legislative advocates who I believe are on the call listening in, and specifically RTD's congressional delegation. But I have to call out Representative Perlmutter for his doggedness in this critically important fiscal matter. So with that, Mr. Chair, I conclude my remarks and would invite any questions or comments at this time. So thank you.
Thanks, and congratulations on a number of fronts. That was a great report. Anybody have any questions for GM CEO Johnson? Director Lewis, go right ahead.
Okay, can you hear me? Is it working now? Oh, nice, good. Okay, so thank you so much for that report. It was excellent. It was thorough. I have to tell you, I just have a genuine appreciation for you and your ability to tell your story and to speak your truth about your experiences. And more specifically, it resonates with me with you talking about being in spaces where you're often the only person that looks like you. And I know how difficult, as a Black woman, I know how difficult that can be. And I just really appreciate you continuing to show up authentically as your whole self, because I know how much easier it is to navigate these spaces that are, intentionally not designed for women like us to really try to assimilate and fit in. And so thank you. And I just had to say that really resonated with me. Maybe because I'm at Harvard.
What a show off. Thanks for those comments.
Yes, thank you so much, Director Lewis. I believe it's incumbent upon me to show up and speak up. So when I was invited to participate, I thought it's important to stand in my truth and acknowledge that, because it is different. I'm the only leader in this space, the only intermodal transit agency in the entire state. And as you all know, I've been in areas where there's been at least 25. So I have different colleagues that I could just, basically hop on some mode of transport and access. So I appreciate that. That's why it's great to have the different forums in which I could participate in with COMPTO and WTS and a myriad of different audiences. So thank you very kindly.
Great, thanks for that. And next up with her master's degree from Harvard Kennedy School, we have Director Cook.
Well, I'd echo those comments to the extent I can relate. I really appreciate what you do and how you represent and your openness in talking with people and so forth. So anyway, just echoing as I can Director Lewis's remarks. I had a quick question. What's the latest on the e-bike policy? We were thinking that was going to come out during the month.
Yes, thank you very much, Director Cook, first for your comments, recognizing me standing in my truth. And as it relates to the e-bike, a couple of things that are happening. Quite naturally, we are very interested in putting this to rest to provide some clear-cut guidance. Where we stand now is that I have asked the team to do some cross-pollination. Couple of things. We have 2-position bike racks on the front of our buses. Currently, we don't have 3-position bike racks, and they're not as new. So we have to ensure that basically there's an understanding with our frontline operators who will be using their discretion to make decisions about what will be allowed on board versus what will be allowed on the front of a bike. We have to ensure that we have adequate training for them because we have to minimize risk and exposure. So that meeting is taking place on August 3rd. In relationship to ensuring that our manager of safety and the environmental, who serves as our chief safety officer, is fine with that as we go forward, because there's an array of different e-bikes. So there's a lot of different nuances that need to be addressed, as opposed to just saying blatantly, yes, they can come on board. We welcome that, but we have to do our due diligence with mitigating risk.
So you think sometime after that orientation period? I'm just trying to respond to folks who want to know when likely they'll have a change in the policy.
Yes. So first and foremost, what I'm stating is that we have an internal meeting to mitigate the risk impacts that came up when the various departments came together. So with that as the backdrop, we have to ensure that we train our operators accordingly, because we don't want them to be placed in a precarious position. So I'm thinking probably the end of the month. I can't say with certainty, but I can sure double back and provide you with some written correspondence to better manage the expectations when there could be a change.
Sounds good. Thank you so much.
You're welcome.
Thanks, Director Cook. Anybody else? Seeing none, thanks again, GM CEO Johnson, for the report. Next up is our unanimous consent agenda, and there's one item on the consent agenda listed as item Roman 14 as action A. That item is the 2022 contract amendment for the Platt Boiler Project. Now, if anyone has a change to or questions about this item, please let me know, and we will pull it from the unanimous consent agenda for consideration under recommended action. Seeing none, I need a motion to approve the consent agenda.
Move approval.
I have Catlin as the movement and Broom as the second. And any no votes on this matter? Seeing none, that passes 15-0. We're gonna move on to recommended action items. There are 3 recommended actions on the agenda tonight, listed as items Roman 15, actions B as in boy through D as in David. The first recommended action is Series 2014A Certificates of Participation Refinancing. And I'm going to be looking for a motion for the Board of Directors to adopt the attached resolution number blank, paren, the bond resolution, close paren, series of 2022, authorizing the issuance of the bonds, paren, Fast Tracks Project, close paren, series 2022A and 2022B. Do we have a motion?
So moved, Director Davidson.
Davidson moved in second. Second is Whitmore. Before we go into discussion, we're going to have a staff presentation, please.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. This is Doug McLeod, Chief Financial Officer. So I'd just like to give a summary of this item. The board packet includes some more details, but essentially backing up in time, we had come to the board, staff had come to the board in March of 2022 with the 2014 COPS certificates of participation having a call date approaching in 2024. There was an opportunity to look at refinancing those certificates of participation to generate interest savings. Those certificates of participation were originally issued in the amount of $440 million, which was borrowed from investors. That money was used to build the N line. Because they're certificates of participation, it was a lease financing type of purchase or loan in which the funding is supported by the collateralization in effect of the N line infrastructure itself. In March, what we had proposed to the board was refinancing those certificates of participation with Fast Tracks bonds. The reason being we would refinance with bonds as opposed to new certificates of participation as it generated additional interest savings. At the time, it indicated savings of approximately $120 million over a period of time over the remaining 22 years that refinancing would take place. Since that time, we did discuss in March with the board that we would come back in July with a proposal, having gathered some input from the board from that meeting and also doing additional research. So during that time, what we did is finance staff reached out to the board approved underwriting pool of 12 firms and asked for their best refinancing idea for these COPs. And I should mention, by the way, you've heard a lot in the news about interest rates going up. That's true for short-term interest rates. And generally what we're concerned with on the debt side is longer term interest rates. While those have been very volatile lately, they still have remained attractive in terms of refinancing these COPs. So the opportunity still exists. We received 9 proposals back from the underwriting firms and looked at those 9 proposals and found there were a couple that had the same basic proposal. We found the best deal to be would be to do the refinancing with bonds, but however, rather than going to market and selling those bonds on the open market, we're proposing to do a direct placement with 2 banks. Those 2 banks, by direct placing this loan or these bonds with those banks, it would avoid additional charges of approximately $2.5 million that would be incurred in underwriting fees had we just gone out to the market. So there's savings generated there by going this route. As in addition to that, the proposal of direct placement, we're also proposing issuing Cinderella bonds as described in the board item. What Cinderella bonds are we would have to first issue taxable bonds, which we would pay a higher interest rate on until the call date. Then those Cinderella bonds convert to tax exempt at the call date, and the banks would accept those same Cinderella bonds or tax exempt bonds in place of the taxable bonds. The reason being is the IRS required or does not allow advanced refunding with tax exempt debt before a call date. So we thought that was a fairly unique proposal in terms of what we had seen so far, but it's a very commonly used practice here in Colorado, as well as many other places. Another item to point out with this refinancing would be that it would still use up the remaining Fast Track's bonding capacity. So the voters in 2004 authorized RTD to issue a certain amount of debt under Fast Tracks. We are approaching the expiration date of that bonding capacity, which bond counsel has advised us that they're not in favor of giving us a positive opinion on the issuance of tax-exempt debt past 20 years. So that would occur in 2024. Knowing that that's approaching and with interest rates, long-term interest rates still remaining low, we would like to take advantage of this refinancing opportunity by utilizing the remainder of that Fast Track's bonding capacity of $350 million. I would also like to mention that even though we would use the remainder of that Fast Track's bonding capacity, by completing this transaction, it actually releases the collateralized infrastructure on the end line to be available for future certificates of participation issuance in the event that there are additional projects identified by RTD that we would like to finance. So it's really replacing the Fast Track's bonding capacity with availability of additional COP capacity. So we're not really relinquishing anything in terms of our ability to borrow in the future, pending the ability to pay it back. What this new refinancing would result in is, under current circumstances, as opposed to $120 million in interest savings, it would generate $294 million in interest savings, all to the benefit of Fast Tracks. A caveat to that is it requires an additional investment by RTD of approximately $95 million. That $95 million is not a net additional cost to RTD. It's simply advance paying some of the certificates of participation off early that the banks were not interested in purchasing through this bond refinancing. So essentially, it would be similar to paying additional principal towards your mortgage. You're going to have to pay that anyway over time. So the $95 million RTD would have paid over the next 22 years. Instead, we're going to pay that up front and avoid paying interest on it for the remainder of the 22 years. That's what generates most of the additional savings, realizing $294 million in savings, which averages approximately $13 million in interest savings per year over 22 years. So it's a very beneficial refinancing transaction in terms of our financial success, especially because it affects Fast Tracks. And there's also an additional use of funding that was already tied up in these certificates of participation. Certificates of participation require that you have a debt service reserve set aside. There's approximately $35 million that we've had sitting in a trust account for several years. That money is there for the certificate of participation holders to guarantee that an interest and principal payment will not be or will be met in the event RTD fails to pay. So that funding will be freed up. It'll be used to apply towards this refinancing and lower the additional debt needed. And I think that is a quick summary. And I do have Brendan Morgan, Senior Manager of Debt and Investments, as well as Mike Newman, Senior Managing Director from RTD's municipal advisor firm, Hilltop Securities, to answer questions, Mr. Chair. So we'd be happy to entertain any questions that the board may have at this point.
Great, thanks for that summary. I really do appreciate it. And also thanks for the comprehensive presentation at the Finance and Planning Committee meeting and the really great discussion that was had by directors present there. So with that being said, I'll ask if there are any directors that have any comments or questions. Director Davidson.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Chair, and thank you, Mr. McLeod, for reviewing all of that. just continue to be impressed by the opportunity this presents. I think it's a win-win-win. I just wanted to, you did touch briefly on the potential changes in interest rates. Long term, hasn't moved as far as short, but do you feel we did talk about that a little bit at the finance planning, where you sit right now, or anyone from the team, do you feel any differently about the risk we face, any more risk that we face to this lowering in value between now and when we might be able to execute on the opportunity if approved than you did several weeks ago at the finance meeting?
Thank you for the question, Director Deschel, or Director Davidson, excuse me. I'd like to ask Mike Newman to comment on that. And if you also could, Mike, mention the rate lock potential.
Sure. As Doug mentioned, this transaction would be completed with 2 banks selected by RTD as opposed to going to the public markets. Among the things that allows for is speed of execution. There's not a long marketing period to find investors. There are no rating agencies involved. The banks involved are affiliated with underwriters in the RTD underwriting pool. So that allowed them to move very quickly. When they responded with their ideas, they could also respond with preliminary approvals to do the financing. Since the receipt of those ideas and having been mandated to move forward subject to board approval, those banks have credit approval and are in a position subject to documentation to execute the transaction. Documents are moving forward. There's a call tomorrow to discuss them, actually. And I would expect by middle of August, we'll be in a position to execute if that's the will of the board and management finds interest rates attractive. As Doug mentioned, there's something called a rate lock, and it's by virtue of dealing with 2 direct investors, you can agree essentially tomorrow, if the board chooses to approve the financing, RTD can enter into a contract today to lock the interest rates in and deliver the bonds approximately 2 to 3 weeks later. And there is no cost for that forward premium. What it does do is it allows RTD to remove the interest rate risk that it faces until it executes the transaction. And one of the things, with Director Davidson's permission, and just to supplement Doug's remarks, which I completely agree with, one of the things that was discussed in great detail is RTD has a number of projects it's always considering to complete. By doing this refinancing, and from a legal perspective, it's actually an acquisition of an asset by RTD because the assets are owned by asset acquisition. So it's actually a new money financing by RTD to acquire the assets. And as Doug said, it frees up assets that can be sold and leased back with AAA later in time. But what it also does today, assuming the savings are realized, is it increases RTD's ability to incur debt in future to finance capital expenditures. By the savings Doug referenced, I think it was $300 million. What that does is that money is available in future to pay interest on other debt for other capital projects. And Fast Tracks and the different projects within it are not completed, but using the Tabor capacity to enhance savings here does not preclude construction of any projects. RTD, led by Doug and Brendan, have proven to the nation the ability to issue certificates of participation to build the rail line. These certificates of participation that we are talking about refinancing for savings were issued at the time to build Metro North, now the N line. Now they're being refinanced for savings. So the refinancing itself does not preclude any additional rail lines and actually creates additional capacity to afford debt to build those rail lines, both from an interest perspective, and Doug mentioned and pointed out, and if I could reemphasize, debt is being paid early. So debt is being reduced. and there's interest savings on the debt that's being reissued to pay off outstanding debt. So these steps don't preclude any additional major capital projects by RTD, but rather enhance the ability of the organization to afford the capital necessary to construct them.
Great. Thank you very much to Mr. McLeod and Mr. Newman. And Mr. Newman, thank you for elaborating on that. One of my other questions was going to be asking to bring that portion of the discussion to the team here. I think this next question, if I may, Mr. Chair, is just very quick because I think I know the answer. Mr. McLeod has any, or Mr. Newman or Mr. Morgan, have any of the numbers substantially changed in terms of expected net present value, in terms of the costs, and have there been any material changes in terms of risks or potential issues identified since the Finance Committee meeting?
Thank you, Director Davidson. And again, I'd ask Mike to comment on that. I know you've run some numbers more recently, Mike, and could you comment?
Sure. The first part of that question I'd like to address, I think is the most important, is the risk question. Because when you talk about rewards, you have to put it in the context of the risk. The risks have not changed. And as Doug outlined, these bonds would bear a taxable interest rate and convert to a tax-exempt interest rate. The risk is whether or not that interest rate converts and is lowered or it does not. There are two actions required to achieve the lower interest rate. The first is a receipt of a bond counsel opinion that the bonds as of such date would be tax exempt. The second requirement is the administrative filing of a form titled 8038G, I believe it would be, and that is filed every time RTD does a financing. It's a ministerial. The real risk in this case is the ability of Butler Snow as bond counsel to RTD to provide a tax exempt opinion. The project, the end line, was financed with certificates of participation, which bear a tax exempt rate of interest today. So that tax analysis has already been completed and been in place for a number of years. There has been no change in the factors that go into that tax opinion, which puts everybody in a feeling of this is not a huge risk. The risk that remains is obviously if there's a fundamental change in tax law, and I truly do mean fundamental, there is no private use, there is no private benefit, it is of benefit to the general public. So that risk is viewed as very low. Butler Snow has been involved throughout, their tax department has been involved, and they have raised no concerns with this. They do note the requirement for it, and all compliance with legal requirements such as additional bonds tests, Tabor limitations pursuant to the concession agreement are being analyzed on the basis if that conversion does not occur, so that there will not be an issue. Obviously, if the change does not occur, RTD doesn't realize the savings, but there would be no breach of voter authorization, no breach of concession agreements, etc. All of that is being worked through and is being updated again based on revised terms from the bank, which are more favorable to RTD. One of the questions Director Davidson asked was interest rates. When we did our last analysis, we have two banks that we're dealing with, Bank of America and City National Bank. Bank of America is taking more debt than City National, but City National is taking the bonds for a longer term to maturity. And we got those rates, we updated the savings, which Doug shared with you. Literally within a few days, I spoke with City National. They agreed they could reduce at that time their interest rate by 8 basis points. Markets have improved. Exactly where they are today relative to the Finance Committee, I would say it is not a material change, but if I had to place a wager, I would say rates are the same or better in RTD's favor than they were then. Among other things, the fact that City National has found an ability to lower their cost to RTD.
That all makes great sense. And thank you very much, Mr. Newman, for the thorough answer. And thank you, Mr. Chair.
Great. Thanks for the questions and the discussion. Director Broom, go right ahead.
Thank you, Chair. Is the rate lock, is that incorporated into the resolution that we'll be acting upon tonight?
I believe the answer
Mr.
is
McLeod,
yes.
you're muted.
Thank you. Go ahead, Mike.
I believe the answer is yes, and AMA is with us as counsel, RTD counsel, but I believe the rate lock is authorized as well. One of the questions that RTD will need to consider when you enter into a rate lock, if you fail to close the financing when scheduled pursuant to the rate lock, there's a payment due. So with the short window between, if the board approves the financing between today and execution approximately the 18th of August, one of the questions is it worth the risk to execute the rate lock, or is RTD better served to let that interest rate float and avoid the rate lock and possibly realize better or worse interest rate? And a decision hasn't been reached. We've been focused on the terms with the bank generally to make sure they're acceptable to RTD.
Well, then that kind of begs the question, what is the cost of the rate lock?
There is no cost to the rate lock in terms of, normally when you talk about cost of a rate lock, there's an incremental addition to the interest rate. That's where your cost of a rate lock shows up. But because of the short time between execution of the rate lock and closing, both banks have said there would be no incremental cost to the rate lock. The potential cost to RTD would be if it did not close on the financing as anticipated.
And that's the question. What is the dollar amount that we'd have to write a check for if we walk, or if the markets fell apart in the next day or so?
The cost is difficult to estimate because it's a function of how much interest rates move. Unfortunately, if rates decline, then there would be likely no cost because the banks can redeploy their funds at no cost and actually realize a gain. We will be running sensitivities, Director Broom, to try and assess that number.
Okay, thank you.
Thanks, Director Broom. Director Deschel?
Thank you, Chair. Just a quick clarifying question, which is if we do not close on time, quote unquote on time, and I'm assuming it's the usual carve outs about whose fault it is and whatnot and closing conditions. But if we do not close on time, would the amount owed be applicable to the loan fees if we later closed 10 days after closing, 30 days after closing, or is that effectively money lost?
I think I apologize, Director, are you referring to the cost of the professionals or in the context of a rate lock?
So I guess what I'm asking is, typically there's, the bank is going to charge a certain number of fees for us to go through this transaction. And there are times in which a rate lock fee is applicable. And I know here it's not a rate lock fee, but it's sort of a failure to timely close fee, for lack of a better term. If we still close, if closing slated for September 1st, we do the rate lock and it's $100. If we close on September 15th, is that $100 applied towards the loan fees we would otherwise, or the other fees we owe in connection with this transaction, or is that $100 effectively lost?
You would only pay that $100 if you failed to close pursuant to the terms of the rate lock. If you closed in accordance with the rate lock, there's no fee due, or it's actually a penalty or breakage cost is what it's referred to, because you broke that transaction. And I think, if I may, one of the topics we discussed with the finance committee and is germane to this discussion is, what if rates move between today and execution of a rate lock or execution of the transaction? What happens? All of the professionals that work on this on behalf of RTD work on a contingent basis. So if the transaction doesn't close, the banks do not get paid. The professionals do not get paid. The only exception might be the lawyers to the bank. But if rates move, the documents that have been created still have value and can be dusted off when rates come back down to a point that it makes sense to execute. And I see May, and she's got her hand up, and I'll defer to her on the rate lock, but she and I have discussed the issues or the potential costs associated with the rate lock, especially in light of the fact that it is such a short window between if the board approves this today and when we expect to execute. And it's worth bearing in mind that time frame is no different than if RTD was going to market with a bond issue and did not have the ability to execute a rate lock. That is a benefit of the form of financing dealing with the banks. But May, if I can defer to you.
Well, so this is May Beckwith, Senior Associate General Counsel. Going back to Director Broom's question about approving the form of rate lock agreement, that's in section 5 of the resolution, page 39 of your packet. You know, there's half a dozen documents that are included in the board package that are approved as to form by the board, and the rate lock agreement is one of those. And I just want to point out that, you know, in a regular bond issue, you know, we have a form of bond purchase agreement with a number of outs, you know, for the underwriter if the deal doesn't close. And this is kind of a similar case with a little bit more risk in the term of a rate lock agreement, because you know, there is a potential of payment. But I think the advice from Michael Newman, and also you know, that from discussions with the banks, you know, to my it seems like that risk is relatively low if we you know, lock the rate close to the board approval and get the closing in place as soon as possible. And because we have the forms of documents in good shape, I guess I don't see a large risk for that taking place, but I wanted to ask Brendan and Doug to speak on that as well.
And if it's Doug and Brendan, if it's helpful, when the rate lock was first offered to RTD, my advice, and I believe it with May's support, was don't execute a rate lock at that time, because you don't have the ability to execute the transaction. The decision on the ability to execute belongs to the board and is vested in the board. If the board chooses to approve this, then it becomes an assessment simply of the risk of achieving closing. And I expect we will close, and we'll have an even better idea after a conference call tomorrow. And assuming everyone on the call from RTD feels the legal documents are now very close, the risk of failing to close becomes small, and we just have to set a realistic closing date that we can easily achieve. And I would like to point out, May spoke eloquently and informed, because she and Ms. Snyder have been intimately involved working with Doug, Brendan, and myself. The reference has been to finance because it's a financial matter, but whether you do bonds or direct placement, when you borrow money, the legal terms are extremely important, and want to recognize their contribution as well as outside counsel.
Thank you, Director Deschel. Have your questions been answered? Excellent, thanks very much. Any further discussion, questions, or comments? Great, seeing none, we'll move to the vote. And before I do, thanks again, Mr. McLeod and your team for the great work on this. Are there any no votes on this matter? And Director Broom, you've got your hand raised. So. Great. Any no votes on this matter? Seeing none, that passes unanimously 15-0. Second recommended action is regarding the General Election Day 2022 Zero Fare and ballot drop box deployment partnerships. I'm looking for a motion for the Board of Directors to authorize. I'm sorry, oh, Director Rosenthal, did you have something? Okay. Looking for a motion for the Board of Directors to authorize the General Manager and CEO or her designee to implement zero fares on October 28, 2022, which is National Vote Early Day, and November 8, 2022, General Election Day. Do I have a motion?
So move, Bouquet.
Second.
Second, Revere Malpiedi. And do we have any staff presentation?
If you would like one, sir, we can. It's straightforward in reference to supporting the efforts for zero fare on a very critical day to get out the vote and for people to exercise their constitutional right. If there's any other questions, Mr. Davis and I'll be happy to address.
Yeah, we've talked about this a lot, so why don't we just go right to questions and comments? And I see Director Rosenthal with your hand raised. Please go right ahead.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and I appreciate everybody's work on this. As I've expressed before, when this proposal came up, I do have concerns about the usefulness of the proposal. And then, of course, as we do with every proposal we have before the board, we have to weigh, so many different factors, so many different, we have so many different options. And so my sense is that we have approximately, out of 2.9 million votes in 2020, approximately 78,000 were in person, or 2.7%. So that means that people are really exercising their right to vote by mail and not with in person. And when I look at the cost that's been associated with it, it's about $600,000. And I think it's more with other factors, but 600,000 in fare revenue loss. We have to say, what do we hear from our constituents on? I've never heard from my constituents on this issue. I hear from my constituents a lot, and I hear the community a lot on the fact we don't have enough drivers, we don't have enough security. And recently we saw articles in the media, we don't have enough shelters, we don't have enough benches. And I think $600,000 buys a lot of benches and shelters and incentives for more drivers and for more people to work in security. So I think if you weigh factors on, the usefulness of actually trying to get out the vote versus, long-term helping out the mission of RTD, I think that this proposal does not meet that. Thanks.
Thanks for those comments, Director Bouquet.
Thank you very much, Chair. I'm just going to be offering comments. I spoke earlier this year with CEO GM Johnson regarding this and how many other transit agencies, as I listed way earlier on in this year, already implement this measure. I do want to remind everyone that this I'm viewing as a pilot program. This isn't a commitment for the future for us to offer free rides on Election Day and Vote Early Day. I hope we do. I hope this ultimately is a success. I do want to thank staff for all the time that they dedicated to. I also want to thank Director Lewis, who originally put forward a action item back in 2020 for the 2020 general election item, which really inspired, my pursuit and other directors' pursuits and staff pursuit into this recommended action item. I just view this as it's a huge opportunity for us to build community value. It was mentioned earlier during this meeting about how significant it is to get everyone on board and from my understanding and from folks all around in the local municipalities, everyone seems to be on board. If we are able, as an agency, and I've said this several times, if we are able just to get rid of one barrier for someone who can't afford the ride to go and vote, that is huge. That is huge as an agency. And I really hope we do take the steps forward. And that's the end of my comments. Thank you.
Thank you, Director Bouquet. Director Deschel, please.
Yeah, thank you. I also want to thank Director Lewis for her work in this, and Director Bouquet for pushing this forward. I've heard several times in the canvassing committee too about folks talking about the 600,000 and no, that could be a bus shelter, that could be this, or that could be that. And it's shocking that when we're not talking about voting rights for the disenfranchised, those arguments don't seem to come up. When we're talking about expensive studies, when we're talking about approvals for extensions of contracts, when we're talking about cost overruns instead of going back to the contractor and asking them to eat the cost. But when we're talking about voting, someone's right and ability to vote, all of a sudden we're very cost conscious. And I just would push those of you who have those concerns to reflect on that. I also think it's, again, our obligation is to act in the best interest of the agency and the strategic priorities that we raised. And those are community value, customer excellence, employee ownership, and financial success. And I think this really strongly speaks to community value. I often, actually, each election day, hear about and question why RTD doesn't provide free transit like almost every other major city in the country. Customer excellence, again, it's an opportunity to deliver great service for folks. It's an opportunity for our employees to feel proud that they work for an agency who values the right to vote. And financial success, I think that's up to the people to decide, but I would say if you're looking at the 4 factors on our strategic priorities and 3 weigh in favor and 1 is questionably not, pretty straightforward from my perspective. Thanks.
Thank you, Director Deschel. Director Lewis, you good? Okay, great. Great. Any further discussion? Any questions or comments? Ms. McManus, I'm going to ask you to call the roll.
Thank you. Director Bouquet,
Yes.
Director Broom,
No.
Director Catlin,
Yes.
Director Cook,
No.
Director Davidson,
Yes.
Director Deschel,
Yeah.
Director Geisinger,
Yes.
Director Lewis,
Yes.
Director Rivera Malpiedi,
Yes.
Director Rosenthal,
No.
Director Sloan,
Yes.
Director Tisdale,
No.
Director Whitmore,
Yes.
Director Williams,
No.
Chair Busick.
I'm a yes. That vote passes 10-5. Thanks for the discussion. Thanks for everybody's hard work on this as well. The final recommended action has to do with the amended and restated delegation of authority and competitive selection. And after consultation with General Counsel Melanie Snyder, I have learned that I can make the motion I'm going to make without having to make the original motion and then amend it. So here's what's going on. And as many of you know, the background for this and ensuring that the board has a say in what truly are policy decisions. The executive committee and others, including Director Tisdale, worked pretty hard on amending the delegation of contractual authority to really ensure that specific contracts from legislative assistants to security personnel and so forth were items of special interest to the board and would come before the board, notwithstanding the delegation of contractual authority. With further and ongoing discussion with our GM CEO and with our general counsel, it's become fairly clear that the amended delegation as drafted may have unintended consequences. And as GM CEO Johnson alluded to in her report, we would be unable to do the really necessary surveying and polling during and after zero fare days, and that would be a terrible unintended consequence. So I am going to make a motion to postpone this action item to the October 25th board meeting so that we can continue to work with GMCEO Johnson and General Counsel Snyder to refine the language of the amended delegation to ensure to the best of our abilities that there are no unintended consequences. That is my motion, and I would like a second.
Second, Tisdale.
Second, Tisdale. Any further discussion from anyone? Seeing none, are there any no votes on this matter? Seeing none, this matter will be continued, postponed until the October 25th, 2022 board meeting. Thanks for all of that. Thanks for everybody's hard work on this as well. Next is a report of director activities. Would any of our directors like to report on their activities for the month of July? Director Lewis, I demand that you report on your activity in the month of July. Anyway, we'll hear more about that, I'm sure. Director Tisdale, please go right ahead.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman. You already gave an excellent report relative to the Transit Board Members Conference in Salt Lake. So I just wanted to incorporate that and reference that discussion and thank all of you who can be there for being there. It's an exceptional opportunity to connect greater with APTA. Thank you.
Thanks. And I think we've got a fairly good contingent. Raise your hand if you're going. Great. Any other board members with a report? Director Lewis.
I was actually just going to take the opportunity to congratulate Director Rivera Malpiedi on her prestigious award, being one of the most powerful women in Colorado. So, no, I'm still not giving you my report yet, but I'll give it to you, I promise, Director.
Okay, sounds good. And thanks for that recognition of our past chair and director, Angie Rivera Malpiedi, who was recognized as one of the 25 most powerful women in the state of Colorado by the Colorado Women's Chamber. I believe we all knew that, but it's nice to have the recognition as well. Director Williams, go right ahead.
Yeah, I just want to report on the fact that we took 2 tours of local public officials through the BosCon course in Denver Union Station so that they could get a firsthand look at what we are proposing to do with some of the money that we just got back. And it was very well received. They had some really great questions. We had representatives from a variety of departments at RTD, and we all learned a lot, including me, who ran the tour. So if any of the rest of you would like to invite some of your constituents to do that, we kind of have worked out, Director Rivera Malpiedi has worked out a format, and you can have a bunch of information, and I think that people will learn a lot. So I'm just recommending it. Thank you.
Great, thanks for doing that. Any other directors have a report? Great, seeing none, are there any other matters to come before the Board of Directors? Director Tisdale.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman. In the vein of asking if we can get some further information about this at some point in the future, I'd like to address the MyRide cards. Some of you don't remember this because you haven't been on the board that long, but it used to be that the directors received an unlimited number of passes that they could distribute to constituents, to agencies with which they were involved that used RTD and so forth. In 2017, we restricted that process and reduced it to a number certain. And I forget, it was like 120 or 150 or something like that passes for the year that we could do. Then when we introduced the MyRide card, we stopped distributing paper passes and instead went to the MyRide cards. Now, of course, we are phasing out the MyRide cards and going to account-based ticketing. And so my question is, what do we do now? The benefit, obviously, of this was very, very strong, positive community support for RTD and good relations with a lot of people with whom we do business. So the question is that mechanic gone forever, or will it be replaced by something else? And as I say, I don't need an answer tonight, but I would like it put into some kind of memorandum or other report to us so that we have an idea as to how that will be handled. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thanks for that. And I would just, Ms. Johnson, I'll let you go ahead.
Oh, thank you very much, Director Chair. Oh my God, I've been here 13 hours. I'm sorry. Thank you very much, Mr. Chair. Thank you, Director Tisdale. What I was going to say, because I've heard about this practice and I don't know too much about it collectively, but what I will say is that from the vantage point of what I'm hearing, it's a policy decision because we're talking about fair. And if you're going to grant fair opportunities, it gets back to what we just discussed, right? In reference to zero fare for a general election and zero fare. So what I was looking for, as opposed to a memorandum, that would be something this board would need to take up and decide if in fact you all are going to basically, provide zero fares for a certain population, and how would that be accounted for reconciliation purposes? Because we have to ensure that we account for that. Mr. McLeod, are you there? There you are, in reference to what we are required to do as an agency regarding fair revenue. And that's why we take policy actions as it relates to you all setting the policy. So do you have anything further to add to that, or correct me if I misspoke?
Thank you, General Manager Johnson. The only thing I was going to add is just to clarify that although the old smart card, card-based system is going away, we will have smart cards available under the new account-based ticketing program, and they will still be branded as MyRide. It's just the back-end system is being replaced to an account-based system from a card-based system. So thank you for the opportunity, General Manager Johnson.
Great, thanks for that. And Director Tisdale, sounds like there'll be a different media that can be used. So that would be great. Director Davidson.
Yeah, thanks, Mr. Chair. I just wanted to say that I really appreciate our team here at RTD. This is a tough job, and I'm just reflecting not just at this meeting, but both meetings this evening, some of the things we talked about, tough trade-offs with system optimization, facing a fairly unprecedented risk of losing our bonding capacity and leveraging that to find creative ways to generate substantial savings for this agency in the face of having been fairly over leveraged, and just a lot of big stuff here, and it's a lot of work. And here a lot of members of the team have been working all day and are here at 9:18. So I'm excited that we'll have a little bit of break for everybody in August. I'm sorry for those that are involved in the ad hoc audit committee that will be having some meetings, but just really wanted to say I really appreciate this whole team throughout the whole organization. It's tough work and it's important work, especially right now. So thanks to all of you, and please have a wonderful August.
Thanks a lot, Director Deschel.
Thanks. I'll keep my remarks brief. In response to Director Tisdale's comments, I would be remiss if I didn't express that I have some concerns around the practice of directors having discretion over giving out free fare. To be completely candid, I also requested when we were offered the paper fare tickets, I did request them, and in the spirit of transparency, I gave them to organizations that provide services to Afghan refugees who have resettled in our state. That said, Director Tisdale, happy to work with you on a policy that may be equitable towards directors collectively deciding how to direct free fare, because I think it's important. It's an important tool that the board has to help generate community partnerships. But if not, without the proper oversight, I think we risk running afoul of various federal regulations and obligations, as well as appearances of impropriety. And so would welcome the opportunity to work with you on that, and we can connect offline because it's 9:20. That's all.
Sounds good. I don't see anybody else's hands raised, so I will entertain a motion to adjourn.
So
We'll
moved.
move, Director Williams.
Second.
Okay, I said Williams and a lot of seconds, so I saw Director Lewis's light up first, so I'm guessing that was her. So any no
It was-
votes on adjourning? No, we're done at 9:20 p.m. Thanks for the meeting. Thanks for the discussion, and take care, everybody. Bye.
Thank you, everyone.
Thank you.
Bye, folks.
Thank you.